a lower official to obey an order from, in your view, the former president?
I'm imagining a situation where, for example,
as you guys are coming in, we're just finish up listening to the Supreme Court. Felice will be here shortly, and we'll get on with the show, but just listen to the Supreme Court real quick.
Section 3, please don't change the hypothetical, okay? Please don't change the hypothetical. I know I like doing it too, but please don't do it, okay?
Well, the point I'm trying to make is
he's disqualified from the moment he committed an insurrection. Whoever it is, whichever party, that happens. Boom. It happened. What would compel, and I'm not going to say it again, so just try and answer the question. If you don't have an answer, fair enough, we'll move on. What would compel a lower official to obey an order from that individual?
Because ultimately we have statutes and rules requiring chains of command. The person is in the office, and even if they don't have the authority to hold the office, the only way to get someone out of the office of the presidency is impeachment. And so I think if you interpreted Section 3 in light of other provisions in the Constitution like impeachment, while they hold office, impeachment's the only way to validate that they don't have the ability to hold that office and should be removed.
Mr. Murray, can I just ask you about something Justice Kagan brought up earlier, which is the concern about uniformity and the lack thereof if states are permitted to enforce Section 3 in presidential elections. And I guess I didn't really understand your argument or your response to her about that.
Well, certainly if Congress is concerned about uniformity, they can provide for legislation and they can preempt state legislation.
Yes, but you say that's not necessary.
But it's not necessary. In the absence of federal enforcement legislation, these questions come up to this court in the same way that other federal questions come up to this court, which is that a state adjudicates them. If the state hasn't provided sufficient process to comport with due process, a notice, and opportunity to be heard, one can make those challenges. But assuming, as here, we have a full evidentiary record, an opportunity to present evidence.
No, I understand that we could resolve it so that we have a uniform ultimate ruling on it. I guess my question is why the framers would have designed a system that could result in interim disuniformity in this way, where we have elections pending and different states suddenly saying you are eligible, you're not, on the basis of this kind of thing.
Well, what they were concerned most about was ensuring that insurrectionists and rebels don't hold office. And so once one understands the sort of imperative that they had to ensure that oath breakers wouldn't take office, it would be a little bit odd to say that states can't enforce it, that only the federal government can enforce it, and that Congress can essentially rip the heart out of Section 3 by a simple majority just by failing to pass enforcement legislation. Federalism creates redundancy, and here, the fact that states have the ability to enforce it as well, absent federal...
Okay, guys, we'll be breaking down this hearing here in a little bit. Having some technical difficulties getting Felice on. Barrister will be here later today, potentially legally Mormon as well. So we do have some people that will be here later that will break it down in a better way than I can. Full disclosure, a lot of this shit is I'm Googling while we're going. Felice has a better grasp on it than I do, but she'll be here shortly.
That it's in the best interests of the United States to provide funds or release funds so that they can be used by that country. Could a state determine that that person has given aid to the enemy and therefore keep that person off the ballot?
No, Your Honor. This court has never interpreted the aid and comfort language, which also is present in the treason clause. But commentators have suggested it's been rarely applied because treason prosecutions...
Are there a lot of other creators right now that are live streaming this?
Context of a declared war, or at least an adversarial relationship where there is in fact a war between two countries. And second, the intent standard would do a lot of work there, because under Section 3, whatever the underlying conduct is, engaging in insurrection or aid and comfort...
We may need to actually restart again. For some reason, Felice can't join. Are you guys looking? It looks like nobody can request. I may have to restart again. It looks like nobody can request to join, so sorry. Third time's the charm.
If different states...
Certainly here, when there is a complete record, lower courts then will be applying that decision, and I think it's unlikely that any court would say, we're going to reach a different decision than the U.S. Supreme Court did, particularly if the court relies on the facts, the indisputable facts of what President Trump said. on video and in his Twitter feed, which is really the essence of our case here.
Well, you had an expert, let's just take that example, had an expert testify about the meaning of what President Trump said. But do you think it's possible that a different state court would apply Daubert differently and say that this person should not be allowed to express an expert opinion on that question? Do you think that's beyond the realm of imagination?
Not at all, Your Honor. 2 points on that. Number one, President Trump didn't appeal the admission of that evidence in this case. But number two, the second point is that Professor Simi he didn't opine on the meaning of President Trump's words. He opined on the effect that those words had on violent extremists. And the essence of his testimony was built around videotaped statements of President Trump himself, encouraging, inciting, and praising political violence.
I'm not taking a position one way or the other about whether the expert's testimony should have been admitted or anything.
Yes, you are, Alito.
Shut
up. He's so
words.
annoying.
I'm just trying to get you to grapple with what some people have seen as the consequences of the argument that you're advancing, which is that there will be conflicts in decisions among the states, that different states will disqualify different candidates. But I'm not getting a whole lot of help from you about
the screen. Let's keep tapping the screen so we can get to the 40
situation.
If this court writes an opinion affirming on the basis of the indisputable facts of what President Trump said on January 6th and in the weeks leading up to it, and his virtual confession on Twitter after the fact, then it would be reversible error for any other state to conclude otherwise on that question of federal law, or at the very least, this court could address that when those issues come up, but it seems unlikely.
Justice Sotomayor?
There's two sides to the other side's position. The first is that it's not self-executing. I want to put that aside. Deal with if we were to hold that states don't have the right to enforce or create a cause of action in this situation. They want the flip to say that no, but even Congress can't do it because they need implementing legislation. Address that argument. Because assume we rule that states don't have it, what would you have us say for the other side of the argument? One of my colleagues says you need, or not then Chief Justice, but Circuit Court Justice Chase said, which is that somehow you need implementing legislation, like the 1870 Act. You seem to say that's not true because they could decide not to seat a candidate, etc. So I don't know that legislation is necessary.
And certainly there are historical examples of members of Congress under Congress's Article 1 power to judge the qualifications of its members, of members of Congress refusing to seat ineligible candidates under Section 3 who have won election. In the context of the presidency, I think it would create a number of really difficult issues if the court says there's no procedure for determining President Trump's eligibility until after the election. And then what happens when members of Congress on January 6th, when they count the electoral votes, say we're not going to count electoral votes cast for President Trump because he's disqualified under Section 3 under the Electoral Count Reform Act. A number of the amicus briefs, such as those of Professor Ginsburg, Hassan, and Foley, have made the point that that is kind of a disenfranchisement and constitutional crisis in the making, and is all the more reason to address those issues now in a judicial process on a full evidentiary record so that everybody can have certainty on those issues before they go to the polls.
Justice Kagan?
Mr. Murray, you relied on the state's extensive powers under the Electors Clause. You talked about the states having a role in enacting, typical ballot access provisions. I guess, it strikes me that we've put some limits on that, and I'll just give you Anderson versus Celebrezzi as an example of that, where we said, in fact, states are limited in who they can take off a ballot, and that was a case about minor party candidates. But the reason was that one state's decision to take a candidate off the ballot affects everybody else's rights. And we talked about the pervasive national interest in the selection of candidates for national office. We talked about how an individual state's decision would have an impact beyond its own borders. So if that goes for minor political party candidates, why doesn't it go a fortiori for the situation in this case?
Well, certainly constitutional principles like Section 3 apply to everybody, but in Calabresi, the issue there was a First Amendment question. And certainly there's no doubt that states' exercise of their power under Article 2 is constrained by First Amendment principles. And in that case, the state law deadlines for when a minor party candidate got on the ballot just came too soon to be reactive to what major parties had done, and therefore risk disenfranchising people who were disillusioned with who the major parties had picked. And it raised First Amendment problems. Here, there's no real First Amendment problem, and a state is just trying to enforce an existing qualification that's baked into our constitutional fabric.
Yeah, I guess, it did come up in the First Amendment, but there's a broader principle there, and it's a broader principle about who has power over certain things in our federal system. And, within our federal system, states have great power over many different areas, but that there's some broader principle about that there are certain national questions where states are not the repository of authority. And I took a lot, First Amendment, not First Amendment, a lot of Anderson's reasoning is really about that. Like, what's a state doing deciding who gets to, who other citizens get to vote for president?
Colorado is not deciding who other states get to vote for president. It's deciding how to assign its own electors under its Article 2 power. And the Constitution grants them that broad power.
Well, but the effect of that is obvious, yes?
No, Your Honor, because different states can have different procedures. Some states may allow insurrectionists to be on the ballot. They may say, we're not looking past the papers. We're not going to look into federal constitutional questions. It's the sort of, even in this election cycle, there are candidates who are on the ballot in some states, even though they're not natural-born citizens, and off the ballot in other states. And that's just a function of states' power to enforce, to preserve their own electors and avoid disenfranchisement of their own citizens.
Thank you.
Justice Gorsuch?
I haven't had a chance to talk about the officer point, and I just want to give you an opportunity to do that. Mr. Mitchell makes the argument that, particularly in the commissions clause, for example, all officers are to be commissioned by the president. Seems to be all-encompassing, that language. And I'm curious your response to that. And along the way, if you would, I poked a little bit at the difference between office and officer in the earlier discussion, you may recall. But I think one point your friends on the other side would make is, well, that's just how the Constitution uses those terms. So, for example, we know that the President pro tem of the Senate and the Speaker of the House are officers of the United States because the Constitution says they are. But we also know that they don't hold an office under the United States because of the incompatibility clause that says they can't. So maybe the Constitution to us today, to a lay reader, might look a little odd in distinguishing between office and officer, not prepositions, nouns, but distinction. But maybe that's exactly how it works. Thoughts?
Well, I'd start with the idea that the meaning of officer in the 1780s was the same meaning that it has today, which is a person who holds an office. And certainly in particular contexts like the commissions clause, it appears that that's referring, that is referring to a narrower class of officers, because we know that there are...
Except it says all.
Well, we know that there are classes of officers like the president pro tem, who don't get their commissions from the president.
Well, that's because the Constitution elsewhere says that.
We know that the appointments clause refers to a class of officers who get their appointment from the Constitution itself, rather than from presidential appointment. People who get their commissions from the president himself are not commissioned by the president. And so if you read the appointments clause in line with the commissions clause, then the commissions clause is really talking about the president's power. If one needs a commission, it's the president who grants it. But I think it's important to bring us back to Section 3 in particular, because that was 80 years...
Before we get to that, though, just the distinction between office and officer, do you agree that the Constitution does make that distinction, particularly with respect to the Speaker and President pro tem?
The Constitution makes that distinction, but at least in Section 3, an officer of the United States is a person who swears an oath and holds an office. Now, the President pro tem and the Speaker of the House, they don't swear a constitutional oath in that capacity. They swear a constitutional oath if they are a senator or representative in Congress in that separate non-official capacity. But I think that
you agree they are officers who don't hold an office.
They're officers who may hold an office but don't swear an oath under Article 6 in that official capacity.
Well, how can they hold an office under the incompatibility clause? It says they can't.
Well, I think that's a fair point, and I think that may be an exception to the general rule, and one might consider them perhaps officers of the House and Senate because they are appointed by those bodies and preside over those bodies.
Well, the Constitution says they're officers of the United States. So there are some instances when you have an officer but not an office.
Those may be an exceptional circumstance, but I would...
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Justice Kavanaugh?
The concerns of some question have been the states having such power over a national office. Other questions about the different states having different standards of proof. And they seem underscored by this case, at least the dissenting opinion below. Justice Samore said, I've been involved, quote, I've been involved in the justice system for 33 years now, and what took place here doesn't resemble anything I've seen in a courtroom, end quote. And then added, quote, what transpired in this litigation fell woefully short of what due process demands, end quote. Now, I don't know whether I agree or not. I'm not going to take a position on that.
Yeah, right.
The fact that someone's complaining not about the bottom line conclusion, but about the very processes that were used in the state would seem to, and that would be permitted, seems to underscore the concerns that have been raised about state power. Just wanted to give you a chance to address that because that was powerful language. Again, not disagreeing about the
Brett Kavanaugh is a fucking idiot. Like he's literally just repeating the arguments
yes, Your Honor,
that
but that language was
made
with respect to Justice
in a less intelligent way.
President Trump had a 5-day trial in this case. He had the opportunity to call any witnesses that he wanted. He had the opportunity to cross-examine our witnesses. He had the opportunity to testify if he wanted to testify. And of course, the process was expedited because ballot access decisions are always on a fast schedule. But in this whole case, from the trial court all the way up to this court, President Trump has never identified a single process other than expert depositions that he wanted to have that he didn't get. He had the opportunity for fact witness depositions. He had the opportunity to call witnesses remotely. He didn't use all of his time at trial. There was ample process here, and this is how ballot access determinations in election cases are decided all the time.
Okay. Second question. Some of the rhetoric of your
Kavanaugh
position,
needs
I don't
to
think
just
it is
shut
your
up.
position, some of the rhetoric of your position seems to suggest unless the states can do this, no one can prevent insurrectionists from holding federal office. But obviously Congress has enacted statutes, including one still in effect, Section 2383 of Title 18 prohibits insurrection. It's a federal
Kavanaugh is
statute.
desperate to let the
And if you're
insurrectionist
convicted of
Congress
that,
make
you
this
are,
decision.
so
Like,
shall be disqualified from holding any office. And so there is a federal statute on the books, but President Trump has not been charged with that. So what are we to make of that?
Two things, Your Honor. Section 2383 was initially enacted about 6 years before Section 3. It wasn't meant as implementing legislation related to Section 3. And I would emphasize that by the time that Section 3 was ratified, most Confederates had already received criminal pardons.
I guess the question is a little bit different, which is if the concern you have, which I understand, is that insurrectionists should not be able to hold federal office, there is a tool to ensure that that does not happen, namely federal prosecution of insurrectionists. And if convicted, Congress made clear you are automatically barred from holding a federal office. That tool exists, you agree, and could be used, but has not, could be used against someone who committed insurrection. You agree with that?
That's absolutely right, Your Honor. But I would just make the point that the framers of Section 3 clearly understood that criminal prosecutions weren't sufficient because oftentimes insurrectionists go unpunished, as was the case in the Civil War, and that the least we can do is impose a civil disqualification penalty so that even if we don't have the stomach to throw someone in jail.
Well, they had the quo warranto provision that was in effect then from 1870 until 1948, but then obviously that dropped out and hasn't been seen as necessary since then. Last question, in trying to figure out what Section 3 means, and kind of to the extent it's elusive language or vague language, what about the idea that we should think about democracy, think about the right of the people to elect candidates of their choice, of letting the people decide, because your position has the effect of disenfranchising voters to a significant degree. And should that be something, does that come in when we think about should we read Section 3 this way or read it that way? What about the background principle, if you agree, of democracy?
I'd like to make 3 points on that, Justice Kavanaugh. The first is that constitutional safeguards are for the purpose of safeguarding our democracy, not just for the next election cycle, but for generations to come. And second, Section 3 is designed to protect our democracy in that very way. The framers of Section 3 knew from painful experience that those who had violently broken their oaths to the Constitution couldn't be trusted to hold power again because they could dismantle our constitutional democracy from within. And so they created a democratic safety valve. President Trump can go ask Congress to give him amnesty by a 2/3 vote. But unless he does that, our Constitution protects us from insurrectionists. And third, this case illustrates the danger of refusing to apply Section 3
I wish I drank.
as written, because the reason we're here is that President Trump tried to disenfranchise 80 million Americans who voted against him, and the Constitution doesn't require that he be given another chance.
Thank you.
Justice Barrett?
So the general rule is that absent rare circumstances, state courts and federal courts share authority. State courts have authority to enforce the Constitution, but there are certain limits to that, certain situations in which the Constitution itself preempts the state's ability to resolve constitutional questions. And, you know, Tarbell's case is one, and you said earlier that once a president is elected, you accepted that a state couldn't do anything about that. Like Colorado couldn't enact its own, say, quo warranto provision and then use it to get the Secretary of State or the president or anyone else out of office. And I assume that's because of this principle of structural preemption. Am I right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So I just want to clarify what that means for your argument. That means that your eggs are really in the basket of the Electors Clause, really in the Article 1 basket, because you're saying that even though all of the questions that people have been asking have suggested that there's a problem with giving a single state the authority to render a decision that would have an effect on a national election. But you're saying that those structural concerns, which might otherwise lead to the kind of result that you would accept after someone is in office, are overcome by the Electors Clause.
Absolutely. States run presidential elections. That's very clear from Article 2. Once states have selected the electors and the electors have voted, states have no more power over the candidate who has been then nominated for president. But until then, the states do have the power to adjudicate those issues.
Thank you.
Justice Jackson?
So when I asked you earlier about the uniformity concern and the troubling potential disuniformity
is not on
of having
board.
different
She's so
states
worried about
enforce Section 3 with
insurrectionists
respect to
in
presidential
southern states
elections.
keeping
You seem to
Democratic candidates off the ballot.
point to history in a certain way. You said, I think, that the framers actually envisioned states enforcing Section 3, at least in some circumstances where there were insurgents and Confederates. And I guess in my view of the history, I'm wondering really whether presidential elections were such a circumstance, that the framers actually envisioned states enforcing Section 3 with respect to presidential elections as opposed to senatorial elections, representatives, the sort of more local concerns. So can you speak to the argument that really Section 3 was about preventing the South from rising again in the context
That's what she's
of
terrified
sort
of, the South rising
as
again.
opposed to focusing
Better
on
answer
the presidency?
carefully.
2 points on that, Justice Jackson. First is that, as I discussed earlier, there isn't the same history of states regulating ballot access at this time. So ballot access rules to restrict presidential candidates wouldn't have existed. They wouldn't have been raised one way or another.
Right, but I'm not making a distinction between ballot access and anything else.
Understood, but the more broad point I want to make is that what is very clear from the history is that the framers were concerned about charismatic rebels who might rise through the ranks up to and including the presidency of the United States.
But then why didn't they put the word president in the very enumerated list in Section 3? The thing that really is troubling to me is I totally understand your argument, but they were listing people that were barred and president is not there. And so I guess that just makes me worry that maybe they weren't focusing on the president. And, for example, the fact that electors of vice president and president are there suggests that really what they thought was, if we're worried about the charismatic person, we're going to bar insurrectionist electors, and therefore that person is never going to rise.
This came up in the debates in Congress over Section 3, where Reverdy Johnson said, why haven't you included president and vice president in the language? And Senator Morrill responds, we have. Look at the language, any office under the United States.
Yes, but doesn't that at least suggest ambiguity? And this sort of ties into Justice Kavanaugh's point. In other words, we had a person right there at the time saying what I'm saying. The language here doesn't seem to include president. Why is that? And so if there's an ambiguity, why would we construe it to, as Justice Kavanaugh pointed out, against democracy?
Well, Reverdy Johnson came back and agreed with that reading. Any office is clear. The Constitution says about 20 times.
No, I'm not going to that. So let me just say, so your point is that there's no ambiguity. With having a list and not having president in it, with having a history that suggests that they were really focused on local concerns in the South, with this conversation where the legislators actually discussed what looked like an ambiguity. You're saying there is no ambiguity in Section 3?
Let me take the point specifically about electors and senators, if I might, because I think that's important. Presidential electors were not covered because they don't hold an office. They vote. And this.
No, I'm talking about the barred office part of this.
Exactly. So
they're all combative against him, like for different reasons.
You have to specify presidential electors because they're not offices, so they wouldn't fall under any office. Second,
I love Jason Murray. I actually read up on him. He's really cool.
The Constitution tells us that under the incompatibility clause.
First time in front of the Supreme Court.
Seats, not offices. And so you want to make sure that there's
Gorsuch
no doubt that senators and representatives are covered. Given that the Constitution suggests otherwise, you have to include them. The Constitution says the presidency holds an office, as do members of this court.
Ketanji Brown Jackson talking to Jason Murray, the lawyer for the people who want Trump off the ballot.
I appreciate that argument. If we think that the states can't enforce this provision for whatever reason in this context, in the presidential context, what happens next in this case? I mean, is it done?
If this court concludes that Colorado did not have the authority to exclude President Trump from the presidential ballot on procedural grounds, I think this case would be done, but I think it could come back with a vengeance because ultimately members of Congress may have to make the determination after a presidential election if President Trump wins about whether or not he's disqualified from office and whether to count votes cast for him under the Electoral Count Reform Act. So President Trump
insurrectionist Congress decide that. That's a great choice.
On the merits,
Can't wait.
And we think that the court should do so as well.
And there's no federal litigation, you would say?
Well, that's correct, because there is no federal procedure for deciding these issues, short of a criminal prosecution.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel.
At it, Merrick Garland. This whole thing, that's every single justice is saying. If he had been charged with insurrection, this is different. This is all different. That's what they're saying.
Ms. Stevenson?
Every single one of them is saying
Mr. Chief
that.
Justice.
Mr. Anderson. No, Stevenson. That's right. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. Exercising its far-reaching powers under the Electors Clause, Colorado's legislature specifically directed Colorado's courts to resolve any challenges to the listing of any candidate on the presidential primary ballot before Coloradans cast their votes. Despite this law, petitioner contends that Colorado must put him on the ballot because of the possibility there would be a supermajority act of Congress to remove his legal disability. Under this theory, Colorado and every other state would have to indulge this possibility, not just for the primary, but through the general election and up to the moment that an ineligible candidate was sworn into office. Nothing in the Constitution strips the states of their power to direct presidential elections in this way. This case was handled capably and efficiently by the Colorado court.
This is the lawyer for the Colorado Secretary of State. They've given her 10 minutes. So the main two lawyers for the people against Trump have gone, and the lawyer for Trump has gone, and now this lady has 10 minutes. It's Shannon Stevenson, the Colorado Solicitor General, who's representing the Secretary of State. Can you hear me?
Oh, maybe they can. Maybe it's just me that can't hear you.
Okay, yeah. This is the Shannon Stevenson, the Solicitor General, and she has 10 minutes in addition to the other two lawyers who just went.
The Colorado Supreme Court did, and if I could have a standing objection, I do want to make the argument that you shouldn't review the court's statutory interpretation.
No, I'm just looking at the statute.
What the court did was to say that we have three important provisions in this section that show that candidates have to be qualified. First, it requires that under 1203 2A, that a political party that wants to participate has to have a qualified candidate. It also looked at the fact that comparable write-in candidates also had to be qualified.
No, but this isn't a write-in candidate, so we're actually talking about the participation of a political party, right? We're not talking about the participation of a candidate.
Use yourself because your wife's an insurrectionist, but I guess you're going to talk anyways.
Confirmatory of the fact that the political party candidate also had to be qualified. And it would be otherwise incongruous to read those things differently.
So how is Section 3 a qualification?
Under the reasoning of the Colorado Supreme Court,
no, just on its face.
A candidate must meet all the criteria for eligibility, and I don't perceive any distinction between meeting the eligibility criteria and not being disqualified. I just don't see any meaningful difference between those two things.
Thank you.
You represent the Secretary of State, right?
That's correct, Your Honor.
If you're the Secretary of State somewhere and someone comes in and says, I think this candidate should be disqualified, what do you do next?
Administratively, and what the Deputy Elections Director testified to at the hearing, is that if they obtain objective knowable information, the Secretary can act on that and inform the candidate.
So the Secretary first decides whether that's objective knowable information.
In some instances. In this case, the challenge was actually brought before the candidate's paperwork had even been submitted. And because there had already been a challenge asserted and put into the proper court procedure, the Secretary didn't even make that determination because she didn't have the paperwork.
Well, what in another case where that wasn't a procedure that was filed, somebody could get, maybe they've got a stack of papers saying, here's why I think this person is guilty of insurrection. It's not a big insurrection, something that, happened down the street, but they say this is still an insurrection. I don't know what the standard is for when it arises to that.
I think anything that even presented that level of controversy about one person having a set of facts that they said prove this would send this case to the 113 procedure that we use to resolve ballot challenge issues like that.
Chief Justice Roberts arguing against his own belief
individual
system
who brought the information didn't want to bring it.
in
the
order
Secretary herself could bring that
to
action.
shut down this woman who's
Is there
talking.
a provision for
The Solicitor
judicial
General
review
of Colorado.
the Secretary of State's action, both in Colorado and perhaps what you know about other states?
Well, certainly in Colorado, if any action that the Secretary takes that anyone wants to challenge, they can use the 113 process to do so. I think states have varying degrees of that. There's certainly other states that allow versions of that. And then I don't know whether there are others that don't. I certainly know that there are some that do.
I think we're told that there are states that do not provide for any judicial review of a Secretary of State's determination. Is that incorrect?
No, I think that's right. And I think there are some states that actually have no mechanism to come to, I think, Justice Kagan's point, or there are some states that don't have any mechanism to exclude a disqualified candidate from the ballot at all. And I do want to speak to that for just a minute about the actual
would that be
impact of
constitutional if the Secretary of State's determination was final?
I think so. Under Article 2, the Electors Clause, Your Honor, that would be constitutional. States get very broad authority to determine how to run their presidential elections.
That's Alito being a POS.
Enact a statute that provides different rules of evidence and different rules of procedure and different standards of proof for this type of proceeding than for other civil proceedings?
Yes, Your Honor, I believe it could, under the same electors clause power.
That issue would be determined under perhaps a different constitutional provision like the Due Process Clause, correct?
Correct. The bounds of the electors clause are other constitutional constraints, which would include due process, equal protection, First Amendment.
What's the due process right? Does the candidate have a due process right? What's the liberty interest?
I think it's not very precisely defined in the case law, but I think there is a recognition that there is a liberty interest of a candidate, and there is some due process interest in being able to access the ballot.
I thought that was for voters.
Falling back on Merrick Garland and Jack
that
Smith, not charging him with
something
insurrection.
away from the candidate?
Certainly, yes, and I think a lot of times you see that in the First Amendment context where candidates can have an issue about being on the ballot, but it's sort of a hybrid, oftentimes First Amendment, 14th Amendment, qualifications clause, all discussed together.
Let me ask you a question about just follow up to Justice Alito. You know, these decisions might be made different ways in different states. Maybe a Secretary of State makes it in one state with very little process, or a process more like Colorado's could be followed by others. Would our standard of review of the record vary depending on the procedure employed by the state?
I think this court has tremendous discretion to decide its standard of review, and it might be based on the process that was employed by an individual state. I think you could exercise the independent review of Boyce Corp that Mr. Murray talked about, or you could give deference where you have a full-blown proceeding like the one here that had all the protections of rules of evidence and cross-examination and things like that.
To change their laws to be more like Colorado is what we're learning here. It's unbelievable, though, that originalist, conservative justices who believe states have the right to disenfranchise black voters, to stop women from being able to have health care, are now arguing against themselves. It's fascinating. It's like they all had lobotomies.
Record in this case.
Of course, if it were not de novo review, we could reach disparate results even on the same record, right?
I think that's possible.
I take it your position is that this disqualification is really the same as any other disqualification, age or residence or what have you.
That's correct.
And what if I were to push back on that and say, well, this disqualification, number one, it's in the 14th Amendment, and the point of the 14th Amendment was to take away certain powers from the states. Number two, Section 3 itself gives Congress a very definite role, which Mr. Mitchell says is interfered with by the ability of states to take somebody off the ballot. And maybe number three, it's just more complicated and more contested. And if you want, more political. And why don't all of those things make a difference in our thinking about this qualification as opposed to any other?
And so, Your Honor, I think the trouble with categorizing the insurrection issue as necessarily more difficult is it's just an assumption that's coming up, I think, because of this case. And again, back to the Chief Justice's point, we could have a very easy case under the 14th Amendment with an avowed insurrectionist who, you know, came in and wrote on his paperwork, I engaged in an insurrection in violation of the 14th Amendment. And it would be an open and shut case as to whether or not that person would meet the qualifications to be on the Colorado ballot. With respect to your other questions about the 14th Amendment, my positions are based on the assumption that under the 14th Amendment, the states have the power to enforce Section 3, just like they do other presidential qualifications. And I would defer to the electors' arguments on those points.
Suppose a state that does recognize non-mutual collateral estoppel makes a determination using whatever procedures it decides to adopt that a particular candidate is an insurrectionist. Could that have a cascading effect? And so the decision by a court in one state, the decision by a single judge whose factual findings are given deference, maybe an elected trial judge, would have potentially an enormous effect on the candidates who run for president across the country. Is that something we should be concerned about?
I think you should be concerned about it, Your Honor, but I think the concern is not as high as maybe it's made out to be.
I'm concerned about African Americans voting. Alita, what are you talking about?
There is a huge amount of disparity in candidates that end up on the ballot on different states in every election. Just this election, there's a candidate who Colorado excluded from the primary ballot who was on the ballot in other states, even though he is not a natural born citizen. And that's a feature of our process. It's not a bug. And then I think with respect to the decision making, and you know, we're here so that this court can give us nationwide guidance on some of the legal principles that are involved. I think that reduces the potential amount of disparity that would arise between the states. And then with respect to the factual record and how that gets issued and implemented, states have processes for this. And I think we need to let that play out and accept that there may be some messiness of federalism here, because that's what the Electors Clause assumes will happen. And if different states apply their principles of collateral estoppel and come to different results, that's okay. And Congress can act at any time if it thinks that it's truly federalism run amok.
Justice Thomas, anything further? Justice Alito?
Well, just one further question, and it's along the same lines of a lot of other questions. We've been told that if what Colorado did here is sustained, other states are going to retaliate, and they're going to potentially exclude another candidate from the ballot. What about that situation?
Your Honor, I think we have to have faith in our system that people will follow their election processes appropriately.
Judicial branch is making laws based on Republicans being bad faith actors in southern states. That's what they're saying. Because Republicans are liars and bad faith actors, we can't let states have rights in this case.
You don't think that's a serious threat?
I think we have processes.
We should proceed on the assumption that it's not a serious threat.
States should, that's what they're saying. That's the argument.
Handle those types of allegations.
What are those institutions?
Our states, their own electoral rules, the administrators who enforce those rules, the courts that will review those decisions, and up to this court to ultimately review that decision.
Justice Sotomayor? Justice Kagan? Justice Kavanaugh? Justice Jackson? Anything further? Thank you, counsel.
Thank you.
Rebuttal, Mr. Mitchell?
I think it's telling that they...
Becomes the worst lawyer, the guy that doesn't even need to be there, because Ketanji Brown Jackson and Kagan made his case for him.
Legislature of each state to direct the manner of
Texas lawyer that takes away women's abortion rights, if you're wondering who this guy is.
Can you give the names real quick of who's speaking?
Mitchell.
With other constitutional provisions and restrictions. And Justice Kagan alluded to one of those restrictions that might be imposed by the First Amendment. But there are others. A state cannot use its power under Article 2's Electors Clause to instruct its presidential electors only to vote for white candidates. That would violate the Equal Protection Clause. But nor can it exercise its power in a manner that would violate the constitutional holding of U.S. term limits against Thornton. And they cannot use the Electors Clause as an excuse to impose additional qualifications for the presidency that go beyond what the Constitution enumerates in Article 2. And the problem with what the Colorado Supreme Court has done is they have, in a way, changed the criteria in Section 3 by making it a requirement that must be met before the candidate who is seeking office actually holds the office, effectively moving forward in time the deadline that the candidate has for obtaining a congressional waiver. There has still been no answer from the Anderson litigants on how to distinguish the congressional residency cases, where the courts of appeals, not decisions from this court, but the courts of appeals in applying this court's holding in U.S. term limits have unanimously disapproved state laws requiring congressional candidates to show that they inhabit the state from which they seek election prior to Election Day. And there still, in our view, is no possible way to distinguish those from the situation below in the Colorado Supreme Court. Mr. Murray also invoked the de facto officer doctrine as a possible way to mitigate the dramatic consequences that would follow from the decision of this court that rejects the rationale of Griffin's case, and that also agrees with Mr. Murray's contentions that President Trump is disqualified from holding office on account of the events of January 6th, and that he's covered by Section 3 as an officer of the United States. This court's recent decisions in Lucia and Arthrex held that officers who are unconstitutionally appointed under Article 2 and that made decisions under the APA that were attacked as invalid, those decisions were still vacated, and this court did not use any variant of the de facto officer doctrine to salvage the decisions that were made by these unconstitutionally appointed officers. There is no way to escape the conclusion that if this court rejects Griffin's case and also agrees with Mr. Murray's construction of Section 3, that every executive action taken by the Trump administration during its last 2 weeks in office is vulnerable to attack under the APA. And further, that if President Trump is reelected and sworn in as the next president, that any executive action that he takes could be attacked in federal court by anyone who continues to believe that President Trump is barred from office under Section 3. I'm happy to answer any other questions that the court may have.
Thank you, counsel.
Thank you.
The case is submitted.
The Honorable Court is now adjourned until Friday, the 16th
You did a
of
terrible
February
job
at 10 o'clock.
arguing your side.
All right.
Good times. I love that stuff. That is like corn to me. I love that. I could listen to Supreme Court oral arguments for the rest of my life.
Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you. Felice might need to go take a cold shower. I don't know. Are you good? Do you need?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. If Felice
I
takes
just like oral arguments.
I bet you do. Don't say it like that. It's great to have you guys here. Happy Thursday to you. We are continuing our solidarity with CoinCot today. So just a reminder that we will not be accepting gifts. If the guest request doesn't work for you for some reason, I've had to reset the live like 3 times today. Only one of the times was my fault. The other 2 times was TikTok's fault. So that's not bad, 33%. But the Cash App and Venmo are there and there. That gets split between Felice and myself. We will be reading any comments within reason that you send.
This is the best part, are the comments.
It is now our favorite part. In fact, if we could...
Funny comments encouraged.
Correct. So, Felice, do you want to sum up maybe just your overall thoughts of how that went?
God, it was so much. Like at the beginning, yeah. It's a lot. So, and I was writing notes. Let me just look at my note, not what I was writing to you, because that is crazy and incoherent, but like truthfully, this is my opinion. Like I have to say, like I learned a lot. Like whatever his name is, Jonathan Mitchell, which by the way, he's a lawyer from Texas, a Ken Paxton friend who argued Trump's case. This is a man who took away abortion rights before Roe v. Wade was essentially repealed in Texas. Like this is who this guy is. And what's interesting about that case, because I was just like reading about it, doing some homework last night, as I love to do, like that case is essentially argued against what the argument, well, his argument was so poor here. Essentially, Kagan and Jackson picked up his dead argument and carried it to the finish line for him. Like that's why they had no follow-up questions, because he was so incoherent with his argument that they're like, let me help you. Let me make this for you because you're not doing a great job. Which actually Kagan and Jackson did such a good job arguing it that it made me see another side, which is that like I think what's clear of all 9 justices for very different reasons, right, is that they do not believe that this can be a choice of the states because of things. And it's sad because the whole argument, Kagan and Jackson are fiercely arguing. Coney Barrett, as usual, Amy Coney Barrett, the ultimate liberal tease, makes you think she's like always effectively, intelligently makes liberal arguments, and then at the last minute is like, just kidding.
I'm unconvinced.
I actually don't believe anything I said. I just was proving I was smart and could see both sides of this. But yeah, a lot of them at times were making very similar points, which is just basically because Republicans in southern states historically and currently are such bad faith, and they have said, if you take Trump off the ballot in states like Colorado, we will take Joe Biden off the ballot in southern states. Like Ketanji Brown Jackson literally at 2 points said the South will rise again. Like we need to be concerned about that. And that is the argument that Kagan and Jackson are fervently making is, do you understand the consequences of what you're doing here? Which, and I don't think, like they painted a very, Jonathan Mitchell failed at his argument. Trump's lawyer is inept is what we learned there. But Jackson and Kagan have thought a lot about this, like the worst case scenario of it all. And they are saying in no way can we let each individual state do whatever they feel. And it like their argument was so strong that it scared the shit out of me enough to make me be like, oh yeah, like I need to think about this a little bit more seriously. Because I was listening to Hillary Clinton, because you know Hillary Clinton's an attorney, a very successful trial attorney. Right. And I was listening to her talk and she was like, to save face, like the justices could say, you know, okay, Trump did commit insurrection. That's a finding of fact, but let's leave it to the states. But what Kagan and Jackson did is paint a very terrifying picture of what that would look like. And is that a good idea?
But the problem with that is that that also felt like the same picture that the conservative judges were trying to paint, is that, hey, look, like if we set this precedent, like all hell is going to break loose. It seems like it's interesting. Like, I think that's what the ruling is going to come down to is like, do they want to set that precedent? It was such a bizarre thing to listen to because for the first, 30 minutes, Trump's lawyer couldn't answer really a single question and it was combative. And he looked lost and I was like, oh, that's good. And then for the next 30 minutes, the attorneys for Colorado did the exact same thing.
The beginning was they were talking about what was happening is Trump's lawyer was making a textualist argument when conservatives are traditionally originalists. He was arguing semantics, like what different words means. And conservatives are originalists. They like to take the actual text and say, this means exactly what it means and what it meant back then. And so that's why they were like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? They are originalists. They don't accept semantic, contextual. What does this word mean? And then now he literally was making arguments about prepositions. Like that was his first argument was different prepositions. That's why they were so like, just shut up and stop talking. Like none of us believe in what you're saying.
It seems to boil down to though, when you hear the repeated questions is like, it really boils down to, should this precedent be set? Like that's what it feels like it boils down to. And both, of course, the conservative judges are going to look for any way to not set this as precedent, of course. And the judges that are liberal are going to have to decide, like, do I want to set a precedent here? They may not be incentivized in the same way as the conservative judges. I thought this was a terrible showing by the attorney
by Trump's lawyer. He may as well not have shown up.
No, Colorado. I thought it was a terrible showing by them. I don't think they were convincing in their case at all. I think it was. I think this was I don't feel like they.
I just want to say,
like I think their argument is going to rely on this. Like, did Trump receive due process, and can you argue the facts?
This is the thing. They actually, no one cares about the due process argument.
Kavanaugh did.
The due process was brought up just Kavanaugh because he's an idiot. Kavanaugh was Googling what are some good questions to ask in this case. Kavanaugh may as well not have shown up. He was about on the same level as Trump's lawyer, like as he usually is, like checked out and hungover. But like due process, other than Kavanaugh bringing up 2 times and it was brought up one other time, like I think they care less about that. I agree with what you first said. This is a proof positive. What you're seeing here is that oral arguments really don't matter. The Supreme Court did their research on this before showing up and they decided already that, I mean, they seem to all be in lockstep for different reasons.
I don't think the Colorado lawyers did a good job persuading anybody. That's their job, right? Their job is to persuade. And I don't think they did a good job with it. By the way, I'm not alone. Neil Katyal, is that how you say it? Katyal. He's calling it an embarrassment. Like, I'm not alone.
It is an embarrassment. Well,
no, but by the Colorado attorneys.
But no, listen, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, That was, what's his name? Is his name Evan? Well, his last name's Moore, so I'm just going to call him Moore because I can't remember his first name. But yeah, that's his first showing in front of the Supreme Court. He previously worked for Gorsuch and I think Kagan. So yeah, Katyal is the most experienced Solicitor General in this country. He literally wrote the special counsel laws. Like, Katyal is the end all be all. So yeah, like anyone showing up in front of Supreme Court to do oral arguments, yeah, we should have let Neil Katyal do it. Yes, I agree. It would have been much better, 100%. But I do also agree, like, that this decision was made beforehand, because when Kagan and Jackson picked up Mitchell's argument and carried it to the finish line, I mean, you saw it. They were like, okay, he's floundering. Let me go ahead and make your argument for you. Like, here's what I see the problems are.
Yeah, I just, it's going to be, I think if we're making a prediction, like, I think that this is going to be overturned. I don't think there's any way, just given the responses from the conservative judges, the lack of ability for the Colorado attorneys to appear to sway them. They didn't appear to sway them. In fact, I think, what's his name? What was the Colorado attorney's name? The first
Moore.
one.
Just call him Moore. His last name's Moore.
Is it Moore that was clerked under Gorsuch?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that was combative. Like, that seemed like a teacher-student moment where I thought he gave him every opportunity to make his argument, and he was just unconvincing. I just think that the attorneys for Colorado needed to make a more compelling case, knowing what they're up against, knowing the majority that they're up against, and I don't think they did a very good job making a compelling case here. I think that ultimately the decision is going to be, like Alito talked about, is that he believes that this allows one state to affect the candidate's eligibility across 50 states. I think that's ultimately going to be the ruling, is that they don't want to set that precedent.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I listened to pretty much a good chunk of Supreme Court oral arguments. And I just think that, like, it's important to say this case isn't necessarily an outlier. Like, since the conservatives have had control of the court, oral arguments have mattered little. If that they have an idea of what they want to do, and they're more or less there to sort of school people, you know, like you saw Gorsuch doing for his student. Like, that's why I texted you that it was a teacher-student moment, because that's what he was doing. Yeah, I texted you that. That's where you got it from. I didn't. Texted you.
Wait, no, I know exactly where I got it from, and it wasn't from you.
Okay, because I texted you that. Look at your text. Yes,
sorry, there was a lot of things going on.
Text.
You were sending a lot of things, and we're on 2 different threads. It's probably in there somewhere. Anyways.
Let's find it. Oh, God, I was writing some very crazy things at the beginning.
I got it from a thread, on Neil Katyal's thread. It was from a different attorney that said, I didn't know.
I wrote, Murray used to clerk for Gorsuch. You can tell he is like a mentor quizzing him. Cute, but not. I read an opinion piece Murray wrote about Gorsuch. Yeah, I mean, that's what it was. It was like, he's like, hey, remember me? You used to work for me. Like, I'm going to ask you. Some of them were leading. Like, I actually don't see it like he was even trying to chastise him. Like, he was also trying to lead him. He's like, here's where the holes are. Like, here's your opportunity. Say something now. Like, now is the time. If you're going to say something, say it.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was giving him a fair opportunity. And it was like, as combative as it was playful. But we'll have, you said Barrister's going to come on at some point, possibly.
Someone said, don't write crazy things to Jay. He might try and date you. That's hilarious. That's true.
All right. Message from Jack Tickle. My name is Jay, and this is my personal view. Jar Jar Binks is the best Star Wars character. That's not bad. I don't disagree with that. And then from
well, I mean, it's a racist character based in Jamaican African American tropes, but go off.
Could you not do that? Could you not make me look awful?
That's the only thing I know about Star Wars. That's the only Star Wars I ever saw, and I was like, what the is this?
All right, that doesn't make
I've
me
never
feel
seen
good.
Star Wars. I never saw any other Star Wars but that awful movie.
And then Haley has added to the ever-growing fund for rug cleaning, so that's terrific too.
That's hilarious.
Thanks, Haley.
Always necessary. Yeah, so I don't know. I think I feel like I learned a lot, like from Justice Kagan. I mean, Kagan, Kagan sometimes. Wait, what? I think I wrote something. Hold on, let me look, because I wanted to make a point that Kagan made at the end. Sorry, let me just scroll through my notes because I'm not sure.
Enjoy the silence.
Yeah, everybody, just do some ASMR. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it started when she was saying, like, why does one state get to decide who gets to be president of the United States? There seems to be a national issue. Then Alito was following with, like, okay, there could be a domino effect. And then Jackson, after that, was chiming in essentially about the rise of the South. Like, they are all worried about the same thing, essentially. Blue states banding together to keep Trump off the ballot. Red states banning, and in Ketanji Brown Jackson's, the rise of the antebellum South.
The issue there, and this is why it's frustrating for the Supreme Court, because that's where it felt political to me. That's where it felt like it was outside of the scope of what they should be worried about. Like, does the Constitution say what it says, or does it not? Should it be interpreted this way or not? But if you are going to make that claim,
and they're originalists, like, imagine originalists are going away from the Constitution and saying we have a bunch of insurrectionists in this country who are out of control.
Yeah, but the point is...
so it's no longer about... This is not about judicial law. This is not about the original text of the Constitution. This is about... They're literally looking into the future and mitigating a disaster, which is not actually what would
that disaster be? Like, if the South is going to rise up and remove Joe Biden, like, fine, but come up with a crime. Come up with something that makes it so that he's ineligible. That's the part of this case that I thought the attorneys in Colorado didn't do a great job with. Like, we have a finding of fact in Colorado of something that makes them ineligible. What finding of fact would you have in these southern states that would make Joe Biden ineligible? Can you accuse him of insurrection? No. Like, what would you possibly use?
And that's when Alito said, which I don't know how much but Alito's response to that was insurrection's a broad term. And his point is, under states' law, particularly in red states, it's not up to, say, a Secretary of State who's interpreting, like, their state constitution. It could be much messier than that, and the interpretation of insurrection could be much less technical. And that's what they're saying. I agree that, like, we shouldn't necessarily fear the South even rising. Like, we need to probably deal with it. Like, you know what I mean? We can't make law based on fear of what might happen. Like, I've never seen the Supreme Court speak this way ever. Like, even at one point, this is the point I was going to make. You heard Kagan at one point say, is it 22A and 14 are completely separate things? Yeah. Meaning, like they were trying to definitely make the point, and Sotomayor was at the beginning, like, I hope you're not singling this out, like trying to make it the point that Trump can run for a third term. Like, it almost sounded like Jonathan Mitchell at the beginning was like trying to set the stage for that. And they're like, absolutely not. It seems like they're trying to say this 14th Amendment, or 14.3 specifically, is a specific thing that has national consequences. And Kagan's like, and Jackson were like, we want to see it as that.
Right. Yeah, and that they made the argument there as well. Excuse me, I just got distracted by something. Yeah, they made that argument there as well. But I think that the tricky part, and maybe Barrister, maybe the argument from the conservative judges seem to be like that states' rights are not granted here. I'm really confused by that. Like, the state has the state has every right to set their electors, to set the laws of how electors are chosen, to set the law as like who and who cannot be appointed as electors, essentially, like, keeping in mind that, yes, the people vote, but ultimately the vote is cast by the electors. That's an interesting argument to say, that the state is allowed to control who is actually doing the voting, who actually casts the votes, but they can't control their own ballot. That's a weird argument. That's a strange argument, and it's, again, like you said, from originalists, from the states' rights folks, it's a weird dichotomy between those two arguments.
No, just understand that what has happened here is every single belief that Clarence Thomas, that Gorsuch, that Chief Justice Roberts, that Amy Coney Barrett, whatever, all of them have Kavanaugh, like, he may as well not have been there, but like all of these
likes
people,
beer.
everything they have said they believed, in this case, they're like, never mind. Every argument I've ever used to disenfranchise women, disenfranchise the LGBTQ, disenfranchise African American voters, every single argument I've ever made, I changed my mind in this one instance.
Right.
Because for Ketanji Brown Jackson and Kagan to be making these arguments, that's the liberal argument. Right, is against states' rights usually, and especially in the case of a federal election. And that's their point. This is about the national interest. So they're not flying in the face of their own precedents they've set. Like for the conservative justices, it was like a bunch of aliens, you know what I mean, just pivoting.
Do you think it's interesting that throughout Mitchell's argument, at no point did he ever make an argument about whether or not Trump engaged in an insurrection? Do you think, because if the finding of fact is that he did, and I didn't see him make a case that he didn't.
They're not disputing that. They're not disputing the finding of fact. What they're saying is that
hold on. I understand that. I understand that they're not disputing the finding of fact, but if they're not disputing the finding of fact, that does hamstring them a bit. Right, that adds another element in the arsenal for Colorado, or at least another point, saying the finding of fact is that he engaged in insurrection. So now what? Like now, how do you have to rule against this? Nobody on that Supreme Court, nobody asked the question, nobody defended it. For those who every day show up and say Donald Trump did not engage in insurrection, it doesn't look like that part is going to be challenged. It looks like that now we have a court case that does say Donald Trump engaged in insurrection, which potentially could help with Jack Smith. Maybe not. That's not one of his charges, but potentially could help in that case.
Well, I think the issue is that what was being said is that this is ultimately Congress's decision by a 2/3 vote. That's what they're saying. They're saying, like at the beginning when they were in the semantics argument, they were even arguing with more like, okay, well, according to the 14th Amendment, this guy could run for election, but then he can't be seated even if he wins, right? And that's the argument they were making, is that Congress, through a 2/3 vote, it's their decision. Like that's what the argument is. And they were also using the argument, and they used it over and over and over, hammering it home. Even Jackson and Kagan were using it, of if Merrick Garland and Jack Smith didn't charge him with insurrection. That was the point. If they had, and they kept saying if they had, this would be different.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm just saying I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting that was never brought up.
Yeah, I don't like when I saw the way their arguments were unfolding, because I don't think it matters to them, because they're saying, according to that Griffin case, like this is Congress needs to decide, a 2/3 vote of Congress. Like so I think that's why you didn't hear them like arguing whether or not it's insurrection. But the argument against it is what I'm saying. The only argument they were making against it is he hasn't been charged with it.
Right. No, we're saying the same thing. We're saying the same thing. We understand that he hasn't been charged for it, but what they did, but the court found as a fact that he did engage in insurrection, and because that's not being touched, now you have to rule on, does the state simply have the right for that, right? That's what they're ruling on. They're not ruling on whether or not Donald Trump engaged in insurrection. They're only ruling on, do the states have the right to do this? And that's where, like you said, it makes no sense that the conservatives are suddenly against this idea. I thought it was interesting. I think it was Jackson. She referred to the rules as gerrymandered, which I thought that was just an interesting choice of words by her. It felt like a little bit of a shot at the conservatives.
For Joe Biden.
Whoops. Started playing.
Yeah, I just think that their whole point is that this, 14.3 is separate from the other arguments, and that it has a national or federal interest because it's a federal election, and that the domino effect of each state deciding could become predatory, prejudicial, essentially. I mean, that's what I heard, but
I agree
it is what it is at this point. But yeah, like the conservative justices, for them, the point is they're arguing against their own previous stances, whereas Ketanji Brown Jackson, Kagan, they're just saying they're going along with what they've always said, which at some point. But the interesting thing that Moore did say, he's like, if at any point this became a domino effect or prejudicial or whatever, that they could do something about it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
That at any time they could do something about that. It's not like this one instance.
Yeah, it's interesting to see like Supreme Court justices try and use like the slippery slope fallacy is for like their defense. They're, you know what I mean? Like, well, then other people could do that. But again, that's why I said like the finding of fact. Like, if you're going to use that argument that everybody else could do this, then you have to then say like there was no finding of fact. In this case, there's a finding of fact. So if you're worried about that happening in the South, well, fine. Like if there's a finding of fact and that finding of fact is upheld, then sure, remove Joe Biden from the ballot. That's fine. That's why it just was such a. I don't know. I think we know how this is going to be ruled. I think it's going to be ruled that he's taken off the ballot, but I don't think it's going to give us like any clear precedent for the future. I don't get the impression that this is really going to clear much up. Do you?
Yeah, I think, well, and at one point, I think it's worth mentioning that Moore was like, they're saying, oh shit, I forgot. So they're saying that why should Colorado decide, right? And then Moore is saying Colorado's not deciding. You are deciding right now. The Supreme Court is deciding.
That's why we're here.
Federal. That's why we're all here, is for you to decide. Like, and it's true. But then they fell back on, okay, Colorado has a very good process for this, right? There was a great case before their Colorado Supreme Court, but other states don't have that process. It's much more murky, and they're worried about what like we have a finding of fact in Colorado, but whatever these other processes are, they were saying, are much more murky and insane.
Yeah. It's almost like nobody envisioned Donald Trump.
It's not. Yeah, it's almost like no one envisioned an authoritarian dictator trying to overthrow our government and breaking the social contract, and now they don't know what to do about it. But yeah, the most disturbing part is like the Supreme Court is basically ruling because Republicans are bad faith political actors, and they have to mitigate that.
Well, and I think part of the problem is that this plan was so poorly executed. Like it wasn't successful. That's the other part of this. Is like it was a shitty insurrection. Like did he engage in insurrection?
Oh, yeah, the shittiest.
But they were so bad at it that I think for some, it's almost like they have to decide if you're like it's not enough just to plan an insurrection. It's not enough to just engage in an insurrection. Like you have to have a realistic chance at an insurrection. Is that what that's what this feels like a little bit like, because they were so unsuccessful that they're not taking it seriously. But I wonder how different this court case would be had I don't think that's them not taking it seriously.
Their point is, if it was so serious, why isn't he charged with it? And that goes back to the decision.
Same reason, though.
But like,
no, it is. It's
that's the point. It's about he's not charged with it. They're not, but they're saying but I don't think they're saying it has to be a really good attempt for it to matter.
Well, it would have to be a little better though. Like the reason, from my understanding, the reason that Donald Trump wasn't charged with insurrection is because that argument you'd have to rely heavily on what he said at the ellipse, and what he said was vague. Right, and then you're going to come into like some First Amendment issues when he said, because he did say things like fight like hell, but he also said peacefully and patriotically. He said we're going to march down the Capitol, but he didn't give more specifics than that. I think it would be a really difficult argument to make. So, and again, because of the way that this was structured and organized with so many moving pieces, and very few of them seem to tie back to Trump, other than he knew that there might be violence. He knew that something was going to happen. Like, that's all we really know that he knew, like the stuff he was briefed on. We have no idea what else he knew. And so I think it would be hard to charge him with insurrection. But is there a difference between inciting an insurrection and engaging in an insurrection? That's another question I wish they would have covered in this court. or in this hearing today, is there a difference? Like, because I think what he's charged with in Colorado is engaging, and he certainly appears to have engaged.
That's all in the finding of fact in the Colorado Supreme Court ruling. That what, like the definition of a insurrection, how they define it versus a riot versus all of that. That is already like hammered out. And I just want to go back. Like, it is my understanding, and actually, through Neil Katyal, this is something I developed my opinion based on his opinion, it's not that, it wasn't about the ellipse. And filings, we see in federal court filings from Jack Smith that now he says, I know that Donald Trump planned an insurrection, not based on what he said at the ellipse, but in evidence I have. I know why he did it and blah, blah, blah. And he has laid that out now later. But what the point was when they originally brought the cases they did, the federal case and the Mar-a-Lago docks case, the point was, we don't want to get too bogged down in seditious conspiracy because the appeals could take so long and be so technical, we could never convict him of something prior to the election. So they left it off. And they said, let's make these really clean, really simple indictments about obstruction, open and shut cases so we can get convictions. That was the idea. And it looks like that may have been a very big miscalculation, possibly.
Yeah, well, I know Jack Smith in his briefings have said, like, what did they call it? Conspiracy to what is it? Let me conspiracy against rights. That's what it is. Conspiracy against rights rather than insurrection. Like, that's an easier, based on the evidence. That's I don't know if it's easier, but it's a more accurate description of what happened. Right? He conspired to take away the rights of the voters. There was a conspiracy against our rights as Americans to vote. That seemed more straightforward. It seemed like it was something that you could much easily
the rights of our votes to be counted.
Yeah. So I think that, like, that was the insurrection, right? That's actually what the insurrection was for, is to remove votes of American citizens. And so conspiracy against rights seems like a more linear charge to make there.
Yeah, and I think it's at this point unknowable because in recent Jack Smith filings, he's not talking about conspiracy against rights or the rights for our votes to be counted. That's in the original indictment. Like, now he's saying, I can prove Donald Trump committed an insurrection. I can show how and why and the motivation for it. So, like, until this court case, and that's the irony, right? Like, we need him to be charged in order for this Supreme Court to sort of recognize it. But until we see the actual federal court case laid out, we don't know what Jack Smith is saying. We don't know all the evidence that he is holding. And there's the irony.
So if their ruling comes back that because he wasn't charged, that you can't take him off the ballot, at that point Jack Smith then can charge him, and we just start all over again. Like, we got to do this again. And then we're
no,
I don't think we're going to get it done before the election.
I don't think they're going to say because he's not charged specifically. I think, like, what I saw was 9 Supreme Court justices pretty much in lockstep for different motivations, of course, but just saying that, like, in this case specifically, 14-3, in the case of a federal election, no. States' rights, no. Like, it's just so weird to see these conservative justices just fly in the face of everything they believe. But when it's taking away women's rights or disenfranchising African-American voters, states' rights are, everything. All of a sudden they matter. But as long as we're not disenfranchising minority groups, this is a different thing.
And look, you touched on it earlier, but I don't think it can be overstated that there is no reason why Clarence Thomas should be in that room right now. His wife is an actual insurrectionist. There is no world where he should be making a decision on this. And this is the corruption. I mean, that's no question. Evidence-wise, that's the most corrupt person in the Supreme Court. He's obviously corrupt. He's obviously taking bribes. He's obviously been bought and paid for. He's advocated that he needed more money over and over and over again. His wife is an insurrection. She's MAGA. She's pro-Trump. She was involved in some of these meetings. She was involved in spreading the big lie. She was involved in bringing people together to promote the big lie. absolutely blows my mind that there's not been more pressure from people, even on like the other justices, to get Clarence Thomas to recuse himself here.
Well, because it could limit all of their rights, right? I don't think it's in their interest. That's why you're seeing them protect him. But I think that is very much why Clarence Thomas made himself scarce. He spoke 2 times.
That's true. That's true.
Like, and I think Justice Roberts was probably like, pipe the down. Like if he had gone in there and been like, you know what I mean, arguing it, so we'd be like, shut up, insurrectionists. Like, it was very smart that Clarence Thomas barely spoke.
Or he was just like, yeah, I'm not.
No, he had nothing to say because he agreed with it all. He was just like, yep, I think we're all, because everyone made the arguments where he's like, I think we're all in agreement here. Like, that everything I argued for previously in my career, in this case, I no longer believe.
He was just thinking about
if we're not disenfranchising black voters, I really don't care about states' rights. So
he's just worried about the next fishing trip he was going to go on when
I
he
know
can do that.
He's got a yacht to catch.
Guys, we got to get this. We got to get this going. I got stuff to do. Let's go.
Guys, tap the screen. It's already 11. God, time flies when you're listening to oral arguments. Let's tap the screen. Let's get to 100K. If you are a Republican in the chat, we don't have to keep. You know what I mean? Like, I think the thing with oral arguments is that's what it is. We heard it, we can debate, but it seemed like those justices all basically agreed with each other for very different reasons. And then months are going to go by and then we'll hear their decision. Like, there's nothing else. Like, don't let it bog you down too much today.
Jack Tickles wants to apologize for forcing me to defend Jar Jar Binks. He meant it as a joke. Clearly.
I'm sorry that I don't even know where that came from. That just came out of me. Some things this is going to come as a shock, but there are times I don't think before I speak.
I don't know anything about that. I am always very careful about the words that I say and the premeditation beforehand. Let's jump into the outline because we did have some interesting stuff. If we wind up getting some other attorneys back on, frankly, you're far more educated on this stuff than I am anyways. For me, it was interesting, but I was just trying to get a feel.
I got a high off of it. I'm not even joking around. Oh God. I love that shit.
Let's get back to, since we're talking about domestic terrorists, since we're talking about insurrectionists, maybe we start with this NBC News article yesterday. This was an article by David Ingram about libs of TikTok. It is in his research he went through and he went through all the times. Is it Shia? Is that how you say her name? Right?
No, it's.
I ask this every time, and I can't remember.
Oh my God! Why did I just forget how to say her name? It's Chaya. It's Chaya.
Adolf Rychek.
No, it's Haya. That's what it is. It's Haya. CH, like challah bread. It makes an H, so it's Haya Rychek. That's what it is.
Adolf Rychek. After her libs of TikTok.
Yes, that's a better name for her.
Basically they went and they checked.
Except for she is an Orthodox Jew, so that's very ironic. If you, Haya Rychek is an Orthodox.
I apologize.
Yeah, she's an Orthodox Jew. So.
I apologize.
Orthodox Jews are very militant. Like, it's a very stringent religion. Like, the worst thing you could be is, LGBTQ. They don't have it. That's what you're seeing from her. That's why she's doing this. She was taught that.
Yeah. So NBC News identified 33 instances starting in November 2020 when people or institutions singled out the libs of TikTok creator the instances of her singling out different institutions, and then those institutions later being targeted. Can I say violent intimidation or boom threats? I don't know if I can say that. We'll say boom threats. I whispered it so that it couldn't pick up on that. They found 21 boom threats followed directly after tweets from libs of TikTok at those institutions.
Like it's like essentially swatting, they're calling in threats and swatting. They're swatting people, and schools at that.
And keep in mind, a lot of these, what these instances was that she was pointing out were as simple as possibly a school or a city center that hosted a drag night, or somebody that's a member of a PTA or PTO that it dresses in drag. It was things as simple as that. Like, none of these were stunning allegations. It was just simply all anti-trans bigotry, and it led to actual threats. Like, it led to schools being evacuated, businesses being evacuated, libraries being evacuated. And of course, Miss Rychek is probably just mad that nobody followed through on the boom boom threats. I assume that's her biggest contention here. Is that
she thinks she's doing
acted.
the Lord's work. Have you ever seen an interview with her? It's scary. Like, she has like righteous indignance. Like, it's like watching like a Spanish Inquisitioner justify torture. Like, it's insane listening to her talk.
There is nothing stronger than the confidence of uninspiring white woman. There's nothing like, just, you have nothing to say, you offer nothing to society,
failing up,
and you walk around with confident, like, just unbridled and undeserved confidence. There's nothing worse than that. Just the stupidity, like, just sheer stupidity, sheer bigotry, and wearing that bigotry and stupidity as like a badge of honor, walking into the room like you should be praised,
and thinking
for your
you've
bigotry.
arrived when Tucker Carlson and Cat Turd tell you you're doing the Lord's work. You know what I mean? Like, that was her first ever interview when she showed her face, was to get like props from the guy in Russia right now, which that interview is, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't know if we should give it life or not. Like, what's your thought about, because that interview comes out, I think, at like 6 p.m. tonight.
That's a good question. I don't know, because the truth is, like, he's been accused multiple times, and rightfully so, because the Russian media and Russian propaganda love him, and they've said, like, he's our ally. And for him to go to Russia, and then the video that he did, I don't want to play the video, but the video that he made.
Oh no, I can't listen to that again. Never.
Nobody should listen to this guy anymore. But when you go over and you interview the leader of an occupying force, and you say things like, well, we haven't heard their side. I don't care what your side is. You fucking occupied another country. You invaded another country. Like, it doesn't matter. There's not good and bad here. You can tell me all day long what you don't like about Zelensky. I don't care. Zelensky's not occupying another country. Countries need to deal with their leaders on their own. They have elections, some of them. In Russia, it's a little bit different. It's not the same type of election.
Just ask Alexei Navalny, who's in Siberia somewhere. He tried to be part of an election.
Yeah, criticize the leaders all you want, but if you are now saying, like, well, I mean, this is the Trump in Charlottesville. There's good people on both sides. Yeah, maybe, but Putin's not a good person. Putin is the one who ordered his military to invade another country, and like, Tucker Carlson's going to go there and play patty cake and say, like, oh, well, we're just telling both sides. What possible excuse could you have for invading another country? What's your excuse? That NATO expanded? Is that like that NATO expanded? Is that the idea? Even though NATO didn't expand, we're just like protecting our own interests?
Let me just tell you something I heard or read, and I don't even want to say it because it's so gross, but I read that this interview includes, like, you know, the part of Crimea or whatever that Putin annexed of Ukraine, like, or somewhere like in that area, they're basically, or one of the areas that the Russian army has occupied. He allegedly is going to take Tucker Carlson on a tour of what he says are Ukrainian biochemical weapons factories in Crimea. You know, like, in Ukraine. This is what I heard. This is what we don't know, but I'm saying, like, this is crazy propaganda. Like, Putin is putting together, like, his case. Like, it's the same way Donald Trump projects all of his crimes onto Joe Biden. Like, Putin is about to project all of the biochemical warfare, everything that the International Criminal Court is accusing him of. He's going to make the case that that's Zelensky.
And how are you going to, like, how are you going to fact check Putin? Just from a logical, you want to defend Tucker Carlson here, and you want to say, well, look, like, it maybe they have biological weapons, and maybe, like, Putin's gonna, and maybe that's why he felt he had to invade.
So does America. We have biological weapons factories.
The question is, like, how are you going to fact check that Putin didn't put that stuff there. How are you going to fact check that he's telling the truth? This is a man who, like, cover up after cover up after cover up, lie after lie after lie. Like, you're going in knowingly at a massive disadvantage. You're not going to be able to fact check anything he says. He's going to spin everything into propaganda. He's going to make this a pro-Trump rally. And now, like, it's disgusting to see on Twitter, to see the amount of Republicans now who are just like, no, Ukraine is the bad guy. Ukraine's the bad guy. Like, I think I sent it to you the other day.
God, that's all Twitter. Like, yeah, and the misinformation, or disinformation, excuse me, like being put out. Like, Russia state media is like just partnering with Elon and just putting out disinformation. And you're right, but like Russian state media, there is no fact checking. Like, that is Putin says what reality is, and then you accept it. And it's very similar, I think, to the gaslighting we're seeing in America about all of us with our eyes watching an ethnic cleansing. It is real. And then watching MSNBC be like, oh no, like, let's bring out all these Israeli state employees to literally gaslight you into believing you are not watching an ethnic cleansing. Like, that's how I would, like, that's the only example I could think, like, recently I saw where I was, but yeah, I mean, to say that America isn't gaslighting its own population as well is not really true. You know what I mean? Like, this is not, we're all guilty of it. And we are the #1 arms dealer in the world.
And like, by the way,
whatever case he's making, we are also guilty of.
Part of his argument, which is also a lie, where he's just like, nobody tells the other side. Well, it's been now reported that MSNBC, CNN, multiple outlets have reached out to Putin for an interview, and he's rejected them. He's rejected those interviews. Why do you think Putin rejected those interviews and went with Tucker Carlson? It's not like Tucker has a massive reach, not the same kind of reach he used to have. It's not like he's going, a message from Tucker Carlson isn't going to get to the American public in the same way. Like, it'll be reported on by CNN, MSNBC, we'll all probably cover it. But why do you think he chose Tucker Carlson? Because he wants a puff piece. He wants to be able to convince Tucker Carlson. He's seen what Tucker Carlson did with January 6th, where Tucker Carlson just like, I'm going to create a new narrative out of thin air, and I'm going to use heavily edited videos, and I'm going to narrativize the shit out of this, and I'm going to convince Americans that what they saw live with their very eyes didn't happen. It just didn't happen.
Exactly.
We all watched it live. But now you have a bunch of people in America saying, like, look at this Tucker thing. It's like, I don't have to. I fucking saw it. It happened right in front of us. Like, I don't care about the clips of people behind, like, that were being peaceful. I don't care. That doesn't matter at all to me. It makes no difference.
And I just want to say, like, when we look at the rise of far right media in the United States, that what you're seeing from those networks, whatever you want to call them, that is Russian state media. Do you know what Trump basically created or used the blueprint of Russian state media and created it for the far right. That's what it is you are Trump giving an interview. His narrative is the absolute truth. There is no questioning the narrative. There's no fact checking. There is no follow-up question, right? Like, that is what you're seeing.
Yeah, when in both in Red Notice and in the book Mind Fucked, the term that gets used a lot is, and this is a Russian term, so this isn't even meant to, like, this isn't just me using these words. I want to be clear on that. But Russian propagandists use the term useful idiot. And that we have found multiple instances of times when Donald Trump has been mentioned as a useful idiot. What a useful idiot is somebody who will do the puff piece for you, who is popular, who has a voice, and you can use them, right? And it requires them being either idiotic or they could be blinded by their own fame. Narcissism, yeah. Yes, exactly. It doesn't necessarily mean that person is, by definition, whatever that is, an idiot, but that's who Tucker Carlson is right now. He is a useful idiot. And when you go through X, you see all these pro Putin Twitter accounts, and you see these pro Putin posts. Like, you're out of your mind if you don't think Russia's behind that. You're out of your mind. Like, when somebody posts something pro Putin, what do you think these Russian troll farms do? Again, go read Mindfucked. They scroll the internet looking for anything pro-Putin from America, and then they retweet the shit out of it, and they follow the shit out of that account, and then that account is then incentivized to post more pro-Putin things. It's a way that Russians have figured out, and we probably do this in other countries too, but we elevate the voices that we want to hear, and we make those voices more prominent, and you radicalize them. You make them feel like, because as those voices get elevated, the hatred gets elevated too. And then suddenly they have people coming at them, but they have enough support that they're like, oh, I must be right, so I'm going to keep going down this. I'm going to keep retweeting and reposting Russian propaganda. That's what, and it's worked on the right. It worked really, really well. Really, really well. Because unfortunately for the right, you've got a former president who in a myriad of ways is connected directly to not just Russia, but the Russian government. Directly connected with the Russian government, doing business with them, lying for them, running cover for them. And so conservatives are incentivized to make Russia not look like the bad guy.
And I think it's always like one of my favorite, like that Guardian article that came out long before, I believe it was before Trump was president, or maybe it came out around the time, but I mean, it's referencing a time much before when a KGB agent defected to the US, and it's about his testimony to the US, which was essentially that since the 80s, Trump was cultivated as an asset and is essentially, just like you said, at one point I heard someone use the term like, is Trump Russia's useful idiot or Putin's poodle, I think it was, like, is like an opinion piece I read once. And like, yeah, like that's essentially like, it's a well-known fact in security circles that is who Donald Trump is to these people, a useful idiot. And Tucker is just sort of hopping in line to be another useful idiot. Like,
yeah, he compared him to the Cambridge Five, which was, they were, is it MI6? Is that what British intelligence is?
Or is that from the movies? It's MI5 or MI6.
Whatever it is. Yeah, whatever it is. Like, they were passing secrets from obviously from Cambridge to Russia, and they were a conduit to, I guess, to the USSR.
Thanks,
at that point.
Zuckerberg.
Yeah. And the key to all of that, the key to getting people to turn is compromise or blackmail, which is exactly what the Steele dossier was telling us. The Steele dossier was a list of Russian compromise that they planned to use against Donald Trump if they needed to, right? Again, doesn't prove that it was real, but it does. But they'll use deep fakes. They'll use all sorts of fakes. They will use that compromise. And whatever it is, maybe they have dirt on Trump, maybe they don't. But this, what was the guy's name? Shved or something like that?
Yeah.
Where was it? Yuri Shvets? Yuri Shvets?
That sounds more Russian.
Yeah, Shvets. Is that? I don't know if that's how you say that. Shvets? Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need vowels in Russian. Just say.
And who's to say that maybe that's why old Tucker Carlson hasn't been in the last...
The compromise? I would love to know.
Yeah, the last 10 years, he just decided to be a Russian asset.
What if he's just, God, can you imagine? I could see him living some really sick life.
Well, he's made some allusions recently in other interviews. He did an interview with Theo Von, which was pretty funny, actually. But
he's a good interviewer.
Yeah, I mean, Theo Von's wild, but Tucker basically said, like I used to be an alcoholic. I used to abuse drugs. He just openly said it. And so somebody who's an alcoholic and abused drugs and who's running in circles, very rich, very powerful circles, it's not even close to out of the realm of possibility that Russia would have compromise on somebody like Tucker Carlson.
It's like imagine like what they have on Don Jr. You know what I mean? Like you don't even want to know at a certain point.
Compromise doesn't even work on Don Jr. because if anything came out, his dad would just be like, "Yeah, I disown him. I don't give a shit. Yeah, I never listened to him anyway." You get to
a certain point of out of control that you're just like, "Yep." Like Hunter Biden's kind of reached it too. It's just like, okay, like, yep, this is what it is.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, like I had a rough go there for like 10 years. That's what I was saying to you last night. Like, you know what I mean?
I lost one of my best friends in the whole world last night. Marianne Williamson is dropping out of the Democratic presidential race.
I know. Bless her. She'll miss you.
I will
That
remember.
I think she should have just stayed on the ballot longer, got herself some more name recognition. That's what she was there for.
Yeah, I just wanted to see her wine drunk on TikTok some more. Just like progressively getting more and more drunk and belligerent. I will miss her TikToks.
She's such an angry person. Like that interview, and when you watched that, because we didn't even know each other then when you asked Marianne Williamson that question.
Yeah.
And like, when I saw, because prior to her, like, and maybe I shouldn't form judgments off her over one article, but it was also about what other people were saying about it. You know me, how I do weird research and like, yeah. And her staff, people that worked for her, like, it is widely claimed that she is wildly abusive to her staff. And there's a specific Politico article, like you could just Google Marianne Williamson abusing staff and it will come up. And the interesting thing in the article, which told me, oh yeah, this woman's insane, is she was not denying it. Like, because it's true. Like you know what I'm saying? Like staff, the ones that were brave enough to like be in the article were like, oh yeah, I think it was like she threw a phone at me or like, you know, like crazy stuff. And she's like, I don't remember it specifically, but if they say it happened, you know, kind of thing. And I'm like, if this is the stuff that people have the nerve to say, like, what is this woman doing to people
well, you just look
closed
at
doors?
I don't know if you watched that whole live. So I was the last person to ask a question.
I watched a lot of it, quite a bit. You're right. She got progressively more scary as it went on.
Yeah, but what happened is I think that a lot of the creators that asked questions weren't necessarily people who like they don't cover politics. They cover issues. And they do debate. They don't necessarily cover politics. And so they were asking her questions about her opinions on things, and she was comfortable there. And she was nice. But me the question I asked her was not that tough of a question. I essentially just said, like, you've made some wild claims. You don't seem to have the backing of the DNC, and your poll numbers aren't rising. Why should we back you? That was essentially what the question was. And immediately
you did have a smirk on your face.
Yeah, I did. That's true. Because I could see her getting mad. Like, as soon as I brought up the first thing, I saw her. She set down her glass and her eyes narrowed. And I was like, "All right, she's pissed." And then she didn't let me get through a fifth of my question before she interrupted and said, "That's not true," to something that was true.
Yeah, she's like, "That's not true."
And just
didn't you get like one word wrong, or she's like, it was like some weird like
it was about
switch of words.
No, it was about she called vaccine mandates for children draconian, and I said you called vaccine mandates draconian. Yeah. I didn't say for children. No, she didn't say that. She said, I never said that. And I was like, I can pull it up. And then I did anyways.
Well, that's how you know she was guilty, though, because she's like, I never said that. It's like, whoa. Like,
my
you know
dude,
what I mean?
Ray.
Number one. Hi, Tommy. Follow. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the carrots.
Yeah, that's when it should have been transparent to everybody. And then the crazy thing is obviously I posted that video. It was a good video for me. That it was useful to me. Like you did a great job.
You were one of the only people that asked a real like hard hitting question. You were like a real journalist in that moment.
The crazy part for months I was getting DMs from her staff asking me to take the video
That's
down.
How you know she's a psycho.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everybody has a video of them on the internet. Like we were talking, can't wait for all mine to come out. No, but everyone has like videos on the internet. The fact she's like stewing about that, and she's telling her staff like harass this guy until he takes that video down. Like
which is insane. Like it's not like that video even got that much traction. Like I'm not a massive creator. Like there was probably like maybe 10,000 views or something on that video. It's not like and that's not viral on TikTok. 10,000 is not really viral, but yeah, for months they would message me. I was like, hey, look, I'll gladly give her a chance to answer that question. She can come on my live anytime. And they're like, why would she do that? Like, I don't know. Because she seems to have a problem with a question I asked, and she's
keeping her up at night.
What do you mean? That was another thing. Like, this is somebody who's bottom of the barrel DNC, right? She has no traction, and she's gonna play like, well, why would she come on your stream if you're just gonna ask questions? Like, she doesn't like your questions. It was like, all right, well, have fun fucking losing and have fun never getting ahead. Marianne Williamson, I think, had an opportunity to create some noise, but every time she opened her stupid mouth, it was about vaccines, or it was about like what was the other thing she had claimed?
This is what this is what it is, which I think this is going to sound crazy, but let me just finish. Like, I feel the same way about Marianne Williamson that I do about like the diet pill industry. When you start to try to you take bits and pieces of real evidence-based science, then you convolute that and use like lax FDA regulations and things to start like pivoting into wild claims of like metaphysical shit and like whatever else. Like, that is unconscionable. You're selling people something. Do you know what I mean? Basing it on like, oh, here's a few facts, and then I'm veering off into some wild conspiracy shit. Like, I can't stand that.
I actually just found the question because I had it written down. Here's the question I asked. I said, you've called abortion a moral issue, which leaves out the fact that many times it's a medical necessity. You've called COVID vaccinations draconian. You've listed GMOs as a source of corruption in our food system despite overwhelming scientific disagreement that they are safe. And you've mentioned antidepressants and the research into biological factors
That's what I mean.
Exist simply because of the industry. She has consistently referenced that like antidepressants are just industry based, that they're not useful, that there's no medical necessity for them, and that depression can be just cured through therapy.
Oh, don't even get
remedies.
me started on her.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that is wildly insane. Like, there are people that will go off medication, you know what I mean, that desperately need medication, or, you know, like, it is so dangerous to make those claims and to suggest somebody go on or off medication. Like, it's actually, that's what I'm saying. As far as like, she uses some evidence-based science to veer off into things that are dangerous and harmful to the American public.
Look, I actually think it was a fair... So I said that, all criticism, but I think I gave her a thoughtful question to answer, where, like, I gave her the opportunity to give a good answer. I said, as a leftist, it's important to be able to not only articulate our plans, but to be able to build a coalition that will help you enact the plan. Right now, you seem to have neither. Why should we support you as a candidate? And all she did is tell me that I was a liar instead. Like, she could have explained why those things don't matter, or why they do matter, and why she can build a coalition. But she couldn't handle a little bit of criticism and saw her way out the door. And good riddance, Marianne. Don't run for shit again. You're not.
And that's why Gavin Newsom is such a great debater. He would have calmly smiled, right, and just pivoted into making him look amazing. Like, you're absolutely right. Like, anybody in speech and debate would have stayed calm and just sold themselves, you know, like you did. You gave her an opportunity to sell herself, and she did not. Anyway, that's the most I've ever spoken about Marianne Williamson in my life, right there.
For those of you asking who Tommy is, Tommy is I think his handle is my dude, like DOODE. Tommy's an awesome creator. Tommy is probably one of the most well-researched, thoughtful political streamers on the internet, not just TikTok, on the internet. Tommy usually goes live at night. It's one of the only lives that I'll regularly watch. Tommy does his research, he backs up things with facts, and he's brilliant. So if you guys don't know who my dude is, I'd recommend following him, and especially at nights. Like, if you want to get away from the typical night lives and see somebody who knows what they're talking about politically, Tommy's a great person.
Not that no one else does, but yeah, like
I say a lot.
He's a cut above the rest for sure. Yeah,
a lot of
I agree with you.
Panels, and it's chaos. A lot of the nighttime stuff is just chaotic panels. Tommy and Jaden is co-host with him. They do a great job. So
I love Jaden too. I mean, I know we don't need to just talk about all our favorite creators, but I love Jaden, and he's like a voice actor. I could listen to that guy talk. I don't know what it is about his voice. Like, the tone of it is so unbelievably soothing to me. No matter what he's talking about, I'm just like, oh, this is nice, and he's right. I just love that he's right.
He's right and soothing. That's
yeah,
double.
Exactly. I'm like, this could lull me into a false sense of security. Because it's always a false sense of security. Oh, well, I was going to say, can I go through, I just want to go through, like, the follow-up, or maybe you want to call it fallout, just from what happened in Congress with Mike Johnson failing. And yes. I just want to kind of play his excuse. I mean, there is no excuse for his terrible managing of the congressional vote, but let me just play his excuse. And then I just want to play a couple quote, like Nancy Pelosi is just epic. She gave an interview yesterday and just, oh my God, Mike Johnson, worst day ever. Like, and just to be clear, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Emerita, has been the victim of a complete smear campaign. Like, it's very similar to Hillary, and it's based in misogyny. Like, if you look at Nancy Pelosi led arguably the most successful coalition ever in Congress, held it together, and not just held it together with a razor-thin majority, exactly like Mike Johnson has. That's the funny part. Is this man, like, if I was a thinking individual, I wouldn't use the excuse, like my excuse for what happened probably wouldn't be something that the previous speaker, like it's the same exact situation, but she was able to overcome it, and you're acting like you have an excuse. Here we go. This is Mike Johnson. He gave like a 3-minute like press conference in the halls, but here's basically his excuse.
Is why bring that to the floor if you didn't have the votes, and will you hold another vote to impeach him?
They're asking why bring that to the floor if you didn't have the votes.
Yeah, on impeachment, last night was a setback, but democracy is messy. We live in a time of divided government. We have a razor-thin margin here, and every vote counts. Sometimes when you're counting votes and people show up when they're not expected to be in the building, it changes the equation. But listen, we have a duty and a responsibility to take care of this issue. We have to hold the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security accountable. Mayorkas needs to be held accountable. The Biden administration needs to be held accountable, and we will pass those articles of impeachment. We'll do it on the next round.
Okay, so that's Mike Johnson being an absolute embarrassment to our country.
And we will do it. Yeah, sure you will. Yeah, we heard that before.
Fifth time's the charm, Mike. Yeah. 2 weeks. They need 2 weeks.
What we're going to do is we're going to convince a bunch of people that we're not crazy. And because I'm Mike Johnson and I have so much charisma and I make so many good points that I myself, Mike Johnson, am going to convince everybody. Like, what's Mike Johnson going to do? Here's what they're really going to do. They're going to threaten those 3 members of Congress. That's what's really going to happen. They're going to threaten them with being primary.
That's what I want to talk about.
They're going to threaten them losing their whatever seats they may have. They're going to on committees. That's what's really going to happen.
And just to be clear, the third one that changed his vote, like I think we misreported it or didn't explain it. It's really only the 2. It's Gallagher and McClintock. I mean, no, Ken Buck and Gallagher, McClintock. Is it the 4th? One of them, the last one that changed their vote at the end, that man just changed the vote because it gave the Democrats a win, and then they could bring it up so they could still vote on it again, basically. Right. So I just want to make sure, because I think I misspoke on that and was sort of acting like that man changed his vote because he was siding with Mayorkas, but he was not.
Yeah,
just to be clear.
I never saw anything about that until like a day later, which is weird. Like when Blake Moore flipped, nobody was coming out and saying Blake it was procedural. Yes. So it was really interesting when like it took almost a full day for somebody to be like, no, this was just procedural. I don't even know if I believe that. I understand they said it was procedural, but I don't even know if I believe anything that they say.
Well, and I actually do think it would, because I think it was Ralph Norman, don't quote me on that, but like, because it was so interesting to see Republicans walk into the Capitol Hill, and just because they were all waiting with microphones and everybody was pissed. Like, everyone had something to say. And Ralph Norman basically, and he said Nancy Pelosi was awful, because that's what the misogynists all have to say. But this never happened to her once. And he said, he said, like, the smartest thing, the only redeeming thing that Mike Johnson did was have Blake Moore change his vote. He's like, that was smart because now we can vote again. He's like, that was the only like thing he did in the moment, like to show me that he was like thinking. Basically.
Somebody else told him to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Here. Okay,
In all
so
fairness,
here's-
that makes sense though, because Blake Moore's from Utah, and Utahns are used to
Oh, is he?
just doing what. Yeah, he's a Mormon from Utah. They do
Yeah,
what
they're
they're told
change your
by
vote.
their leaders. Okay, that's
Yeah.
it's bred into them.
Yeah. So so now next I just want to play. This is Hakeem Jeffries at his press conference yesterday.
It's not our responsibility to let House Republicans know which members will or will not be present on the House floor on any other day or in connection with any given vote.
Yeah, like Mike Johnson literally said, if you were listening to what he said, his excuse was, I didn't expect someone to be there that was there. And so now that's why I wanted to make that clear. Hakeem Jeffries saying, like, we never have to tell you on any day in Congress who is present and who is not present. And now let's listen to Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Emerita, make the point like that Mike Johnson is inept.
Speaker Emerita, I'm trying to remember if you ever went to the floor not knowing where the votes were.
No, I always say to my colleagues, now the Republicans and the leadership, don't bring a bill to the floor unless you know you have the votes. And in order to know you have the votes, you have to have some in your pocket.
Did you hear that? In order to know you have the votes, you have to have some in your pocket. Mike Johnson, literally by his own admission, did not do that. Like Nancy's saying, I knew I had the votes, but also you have to have a couple extra or you don't even go down there.
Well, what's going to change then? Like, do they think they're going to get? Obviously, like, can you threaten Ken Buck? He's resigning. I don't think that's a vote you can win. I don't know where Gallagher or McClintock sit. Where I don't even know where they're from. Let's look that up. That's a good idea.
Gallagher's from New York, right?
Okay, moderate. What about McClintock?
Well,
do you know?
the problem is, so Gallagher was elected. I just want to give you just a history of why Mike Gallagher is probably doing the right thing. New York.
Wisconsin.
Was
Mike Gallagher?
Is it Mike? Is he from Wisconsin?
Unless there's another Gallagher.
No,
I'm seeing
okay, never
Wisconsin.
mind. I'm thinking of someone else. Okay, he's from Wisconsin. Like, perfect. So then I don't know what his motivations are. So I'm not going to speak to that. But yeah, McClintock is very firm. I mean, McClintock's own words yesterday, because you remember I played the clip of Margarine in the morning yelling coming out of the underground tunnel and like screaming that McClintock needs to like talk to his voters and he needs to, what did she say? Read the room, I believe is what she screamed about McClintock.
Sounds like a
and
threat, Marge.
Yeah, and McClintock yesterday was like, Margarine needs to read the Constitution.
Yeah, McClintock's from
And
California,
again-
by the way. So Wisconsin and California.
Yeah, McClintock's from California. And so, and the point that they're making, again, is not like, Mayorkas is a great guy, like, let's support him through this. Like, they're making the point that we have worse Republicans. If we set this precedent for impeachment, we're setting them precedent, like, for Supreme Court justices, for any type of person to be brought up on impeachment based on this. And that's why they don't want to do it. It's lowering a threshold of
Gallagher
impeachment.
is the chairman of the House Select Committee on China, by the way. So there goes that job, Gallagher. I hope you didn't like it that much. I
know. I hope you didn't need that. Wait, I want to play the
gone.
end of Pelosi's thing she said, because it got better.
My colleagues, now the Republicans and the leadership, don't bring a bill to the floor unless you know you have the votes. And in order to know you have the votes, you have to have some in your pocket. They keep talking about Al Green. We were surprised. I was surprised to see Hal Rogers there, my former chairman, in my respect, former chair of the Appropriations Committee. He came, well, you'd have to see the apparatus he had on after being in an automobile accident, but they brought him in for that. But for them to say that you have to have your votes. Don't worry about the other side. You have to have your votes. You know what is a majority. If you don't have that, don't bring it to the floor. Well,
I just love her because she did it so quietly and just ran the show. Like, that woman is a force to be reckoned with in every way. Like, it's like, if we didn't know she was great, watching the Republican speakers after her flounder And McCarthy is a competent legislator. He knows the rules of the House. Like, he knew what was what, and he still couldn't handle it because he has a caucus of buffoons, and that is a problem for him. And
Well,
Al Green showed up on MSNBC yesterday.
In all fairness, Nancy Pelosi didn't have like a former president or a presidential candidate undermining her for everything that she did. Not to say that she wasn't great at it, but I don't care how good you are as the Speaker of the House. Donald Trump is running that shit. It doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do to outweigh what Donald Trump wants. I mean, this is ridiculous. This attempting to impeach Mayorkas is one of the dumbest things Congress has done. This is absurdity, and yet people are so afraid of Donald Trump that they're just like, yeah, we're going to go along with this. This solves nothing. It causes more issues at the border. It causes more issues with Homeland Security. Like, all this does is set our country back if you continue down this road. If you impeach Mayorkas and remove him, we're starting over with a new leader, and that takes time. Like, it's not like it's just business as usual. A new leader has to be acclimated. That means they have to assign new leadership. They have to get up to date on what we're doing. And potentially there's some policy changes that they would want to implement. All of this just slows down our ability to address the border, which is, again, what Republicans want. They want to sit here. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be on Twitter every day and on the news every day talking about how bad things are at the southern border, and then stymie any attempt to fix what's happening at our southern border every single day. And I think the American people, frankly, are figuring it out. I really do. I think there's Republicans that are figuring it out. The moderates see right through it. This is such a transparent move by Donald Trump, and it's so obvious that they're torpedoing the safety of our country to try and get Donald Trump reelected, that I think this is all going to backfire for them. It's not playing well.
Yeah, so, well, I don't know, like, first let's listen to Al Green, because, like, this man, if we didn't love Representative Al Green, this man had surgery, hopped in an Uber, listen to what, let's just let him tell his story. He's a great guy. And listening to AOC also talk about him yesterday, it makes we should all be paying more attention to Al Green, because he seems like an amazing person.
To give your vote because you felt passionately about making sure your vote counted to not impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, but you didn't realize at the time yours could be the deciding vote? Were you asked by Democratic leadership to try to rush there, or was this part of a broader strategy by Democrats to get you there?
Mr. Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries, was the consummate professional. When I called him, his first concern was my health. And he said to me, Al, your health comes first. I called him, quite frankly, to let him know that I was about to Uber over to the Capitol.
He'd called an Uber.
And that was going to be my mode of transportation. And he said, well, Al, if you're going to come, we can get transportation for you. So I got the transportation. I never went to his office. I didn't secret myself in some place.
He said, I didn't secret myself in some place. You know, Margarine said he was like hiding behind a chair or whatever.
To the area that Dr. Monahan had set aside for me so that I could continue my health care. And I assured these physicians here that I was going to do this because they were concerned, as I would want them to be, about my leaving the house.
Absolutely.
Nothing planned, no trickery, just a person wanted to make sure my voice was heard, my vote was counted, because I understand who Secretary Mayorkas is.
Congressman,
good, decent person.
A good, decent person. Got out of his hospital bed barefoot to show up for a good, decent person. Okay, Al Green, we see you.
It's not the first time that somebody has come out of the hospital when their health was on the line to stand up against Republicans. Like, I'm reminded of John McCain. Although, like, in his last days with brain cancer, like, deciding I've got to be on the House floor and I have to protect Obamacare. I think that was the pre-existing conditions.
Affordable care. Yes, the pre-existing conditions. John McCain, with like his last breath, like made it so they couldn't eliminate or use pre-existing conditions to not insure people. Like, that makes me cry.
Yeah, McCain, the
Trump
warmonger.
talks about that Trump mentions that once a week on True Social, doesn't he?
Yeah.
The thumbs down. He can't stand it.
He hates it. He hates it so much. And why would you brag about that if you're Donald Trump, other than you're just like, you're sad? You really think, for anybody, any Republican, if you're here, do you really think that getting rid of pre-existing conditions is a win for you? Do you think is that a win for Republicans? That's only a win for insurance companies. That is not a win for anybody else. That is
we
directly
all get sick
voting
eventually.
That's directly voting against your interests. And yet Donald Trump, because he just doesn't like that John McCain thwarted him. He doesn't like that. So he's going to bring that up all the time. Notice he doesn't ever bring up what it was for. He doesn't bring it, he's a traitor. That's all. He's a rhino. He's a traitor. Well, what did he do?
He says that John McCain wanted to save Obamacare. Tell him why. Tell him what he was doing. Tell him what you were trying to do. Absolutely. He never tells the true story. But this is the best part, and I don't know if you've seen this. So it's about to get good. And here's the craziest part. Yesterday, Arizona senators, I know I spent so much time shitting on Sinema, right? And her selling out to corporations. But the thing about Sinema is she's not an insurrectionist, right? She's acting, I don't like the stance she's taken, how she's backing up corporations and loves to filibuster at every turn. I think that's gross. I think it's gross. She told us she was a Democrat, and that seems very questionable now. What she met some lobbyists from K Street and has somehow garnered. What does she have? She has millions and millions of dollars.
It's a hell of a war
She had
chest.
no money, $200,000 before she went into Congress. But so what happened was, and I'll say this, Chris Murphy, Lankford, Sinema, the ones who were the primary negotiators, a lot of people, when Trump attacks, could lay down and die. That is not what they did yesterday. I don't know if you guys know. These people went on TV and basically were like, Trump's a liar and he's a piece of shit. And I'm not going to, especially Lankford. I'm so impressed with Lankford. That man is the most conservative, most MAGA, and he's just like, you're not slandering me. Wait.
His speech on the Senate floor was incredible. I don't know if you saw that one yesterday.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to play. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's it. Or just a couple, the best parts of it, not the whole thing.
Some of them may have policy differences. Some of them have been very clear with me. They have political differences with the bill. They say it's the wrong time to solve the problem, or let the presidential election solve this problem. In fact, I had a popular commentator 4 weeks ago that I talked to that told me flat out, before they knew any of the contents of the bill, nothing was out at that point, that told me flat out, if you try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this presidential year, I will do whatever I can to destroy you. Because I do not want you to solve this during the presidential election. By the way, they have been faithful to their promise and have done everything they can to destroy me in the past several weeks.
And if you ask who I think that is, I think that when, a lot of people on X were saying, oh, it's Hannity, but I actually don't think, I think it's Laura Ingraham, in my opinion. That's because she's the one who's been loudly on Fox saying, I talked to the before every episode of her show now, she likes to throw out, I just got off the phone with the president. And so that, in my opinion, if I had to guess who he's talking about, and because of what Laura Ingram's doing day in and day out, trying to ruin his life on her show, I think it's her.
I think it's Steve Bannon. I think Steve Bannon makes the
Steve
most
Bannon's
sense. He's calling for his resignation, saying he's that sounds like a Steve Bannon move.
Oh yeah, well, but I don't know. I just think because Fox has a wider audience, but I don't know. It's opinion. It's multiple people, right? It's everyone from MAGA that's loyal to Trump is trying to ruin his life. And we'll probably never know. But it's just, I just don't think it's Hannity. I feel like Hannity moved to Florida a little bit, and it's kind of I'm chilling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's trying to stay. Yeah, he's not trying to
he's laying low. Hannity's laying real low right now. Okay, so here's another.
Hold on. Amber sent a gift because I love me some RTP and Felice.
Aww.
Just as a reminder, you guys, we are not participating, or we are participating in CoinCon.
Tap the screen.
no gifts. We do take donations through those. And also, as a reminder, those who are in the comments who are opposed to anything we say, we would invite you to come up here and have a conversation with us.
Yeah, and we want to just talk, right? I mean, it might. We're calm. We'd like to have a conversation about what you think about all this. And it can be about whatever you want. It doesn't have to be on the topic. You can express your thoughts and feelings. Okay, so this is a clip from Langford, less about people trying to ruin his life and more about what the issues are.
So we need a change in the law. I understand we have differences, but we've got to sit down together, figure out how we're going to solve problems, because the American people sent us here to do that. This is the pen that I was handed at that desk when I was sworn in to the United States Senate. And I signed a book that was at that desk with this pen because I was becoming a United States Senator. Because the people at home sent me here to get stuff done and to solve problems. There's no reason for me to have this pen if we're just going to do press conferences. I can do press conferences from anywhere, but we can only make law from this room. And to do that, you need one of these pens. There's 100 of them in this room, and 60 of us have to agree to solve a problem. And I'm determined to sit down with anyone who wants to solve the problem, regardless of what side of the aisle that they're on, to figure out how we solve these things. Because Americans are ticked off that this is not resolved. And they expect us to get things done. So why don't we do that? So we need to...
And it sounds like so... I mean, why would he shouldn't have to say it. But what he's saying is I came here to write legislation to change things, and I'm willing to work with anyone, Democrat or Republican, to solve a problem, to negotiate and solve a problem. And that should be obvious. Nobody should have to say that out loud. But we have people like Ted Cruz, like Rafael Cruz, who are not here to solve problems.
Yeah, I thought the way that he laid that out was brilliant, in the way that just saying like, hey, look, this is literally our job. And so much of being in Congress, so much of being a senator now are things that were not intended by our founding fathers, are not helpful to the job. Like, it's become a PR campaign, and it's frankly, it's embarrassing. There's a lot of things about how our government operates that I fucking hate. And one of the main things I hate about how our government operates is that people come to the House floor or the Senate floor with a speech, and they read their speech, and they make their fiery points, and then they walk out of the room. We're not debating things on the floor there anymore. There is no debate. The talking points are given before you get there. You come in, you make your speech, you hope that gets traction on Twitter, then you get to make then you get to go on CNN or Fox, and you get to be the star for a day, and you get to elevate, and then you're going to get some fundraising, and you're going to get kudos from the House majority or minority leader, and they're going to tell you how great you are for the party, and that's it. Like, that's most of what they're doing now. And Langford doesn't really have the face for TV, doesn't have the personality for TV or radio. Like, he is a serious legislator, and he's begging people to just legislate. That's wild. When it's odd for us to see somebody begging to legislate, to leave all the bullshit at the door and come in and legislate. But that's what happens when you start electing people based on their personality or based on their strict adherence to your party's line, which obviously on the left there doesn't seem to be that many direct lines, but on the right it's just your allegiance to Donald Trump. And it's got to be incredibly eye-opening for somebody like Langford, who has aligned mostly with President Trump and just probably thought, hey, this is a good thing for me, I align with his views. And now he's recognizing that even when he aligns with his views, if it's not good for Donald Trump, the party will no longer be with you. It's embarrassing to see people like Mike Lee, another senator.
The most embarrassing.
Mike Lee saying he bungled this. He bungled it, Mike Lee. Like, what did he do? He negotiated the shit out of that bill. He got this is an overwhelmingly conservative bill. He got far more of what he wanted and gave up almost nothing. What did he give up? The funding for Ukraine, and which, by the way, the only reason Ukraine was in there is because they asked for funding for Ukraine, and the Republicans said, "Fine, we'll do it, but you got to do a border deal." And on the border, the conservatives got virtually everything that they wanted, almost everything.
Okay, let me play this quick.
You should be embarrassed if you're a Republican today. You really should. You should be embarrassed every fucking day because Trump is there, but today specifically, you should be very embarrassed.
And if you care about freedom, right? You guys are always yelling about freedom. Like, you now have a party where you are not allowed to think for yourself. If at any point you have a thought that differs from Donald Trump's thoughts, you are no longer allowed to exist in the Republican Party. The fact that none of you take issue with that is a little terrifying. Okay, so now I'm going to play the cinema clip. This is like probably yesterday was the most respect I've ever had for this woman. Actually, this has been going on for like a week because I've been following a lot of her comments she made. And I'm like, okay, cinema, like today I am proud that you are Arizona's senator.
HR 2 doesn't even fund new detention beds, guys.
Did you hear what she said? I just want to repeat what she said. HR 2 does not even fund new detention beds. And do you know why? Because what HR 2 is a privatized prison bill. It's to help the privatized prison corporation make money. Like, it has nothing to do with increasing detention beds.
I don't remember if it was Eric or Gorilla, but that was the argument. Like, oh, it's not enough. 50,000 is not enough. But what they presented does nothing. Zero. Like, 50,000, it's more than zero.
Yeah, HR 2, no new detention beds. PAB was like, we need 2 million beds, which is idiotic because we'd have to pay for those people to be detained and we'd go bankrupt. But he wasn't thinking in that moment. But the point is, they want to hear that we're going to imprison people we have no right to, you know what I mean? Whatever. But HR 2, no new detention beds. So let us move on from there. But great point.
Doesn't even fund new detention beds, guys. HR 2, another example of all talk and no action. So if you want to spin the border crisis for your own political agendas, go. We are busy.
Oh, why did
it cut it? Agendas, go. We are busy. HR 2 doesn't.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Of all talk and no action. So if you want to spin the border crisis for your own political agendas, go right ahead. If you want to continue to use the southern border as a backdrop for your political campaign, that's fine. Good luck to you. But I have a very clear message for anyone using the southern border for staged political events. Don't come to Arizona. Take your political theater to Texas. Do not bring it to my state. Because in Arizona, we're serious. We don't have time for your political games. We are not interested in you posing for the cameras. In Arizona, we are busy.
Preach, cinema, preach. Like, don't bring your photo ops to Arizona where we have real problems. Like, it's so true. This is all political theater. The border for Republicans is kabuki, is literally political theater.
Yeah, it's so tiresome at this point. And this isn't something that can go on forever. This is why you see Republicans today just immediately changing course. I added it at the end because it happened during the hearing. But now Marge is filing second set of ethics complaints against Fani Willis, saying that the failure to disclose luxury vacations allegedly paid for by her secret boyfriend using taxpayer money is an in quotes scandal of epic proportions. Like, this is what
the
Republicans
woman who
are doing
was
today.
having an affair with a figure in the far right media who, that woman is now upset, is trying to censure someone who was not married but was having a private relationship with someone. The adulteress is trying to accuse someone else of being an adulteress. Okay, I'm just making sure I'm understanding that.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that she's making this link saying like that they're using this money. She's funneling money essentially to take herself on vacations. But Nathan Wade could be charging more money. Like he's giving Georgia a deal at his rate. I think it's $250 or $300 an hour.
Cheap.
Like that is cheap. He's
billable legal hours are like $500 for this type of thing. It's like a 50% discount.
What is his name? The Midas.
My
touch,
brother is a
guy.
lawyer. His billable hours are like $650.
He said Nathan Wade should be charging between $500 and $750 an hour, and he's charging. I can't remember if it's $250 or $300. It's something. It's one of those numbers.
I think it's $250. I think you got it right. I'm pretty sure. I was shocked. I could not believe the deal that she got like that. So yeah, we've paid him basically nothing. But that's not the point. Like the point is Margarine doesn't understand how the law works. So obviously she's just again, here we go with another censure or whatever that means nothing, because you would have to prove that Nathan Wade has no money other than the exact amount of money that the state government gave him. Do you know what, like, you have to prove that he took that specific money and used it, which doesn't even prove anything about Fonnie Willis.
Yeah, you would then have to prove, like, that's the point of, like, bringing up how much he could make. In order for this to be unethical, there has to be some sort of like quid pro quo here. And what's the quid pro quo? That this person who makes more money outside of doing this case is going to take less money and then take Fonnie Willis on a vacation? That doesn't make any sense. But again, whether it doesn't make sense, it's going to go nowhere because it's Marge, and she, like, even if she ever did have a good point, she'll never be able to illustrate it or articulate it. It doesn't matter. It's just further point that Republicans are not serious. They're not serious legislators. They're not serious about you. They're not serious about me. They're not serious about helping this country. They are serious about one thing and one thing only: smearing Democrats and getting Donald Trump reelected. And I hate to tell you that if Donald Trump gets reelected, guess what? These problems are still gonna fucking be here, and you still elected the same fucking moron who caused these problems in the first place, or at the very least didn't fix any of these problems at the first place. It's such, like, we are not supposed to be this goddamn stupid. We're not. We're supposed to be better than this, America. Please stop.
I'm sending you a text right now so you can look at it, because the cyclical argument that's going on is so true. Like, this is what the argument is, and it's absolute proof what happened yesterday, that the point is the chaos. Like, it started with, why should we secure Ukraine's border before our own, right? That was the original argument when they said, we need aid for Ukraine and we need aid for Israel. They said, no, our border's a mess. Help us secure our border and we'll tie the Ukraine and Israel funding to that. Then they're like, okay, we'll take you at your word. So Langford, Sinema, Murphy negotiated this bill for 3 months. So here comes the bipartisan supplemental security bill that we see now. Then they all started screwing. They're like, oh shit, you did what we said? We didn't expect you to do that. And it's a great bill. Oh no. So then they say, no, we have to do them separately. They can't be tied, even though we asked you to tie them together. Oh no, just kidding. They can't be tied together. Like, that's now the argument is, it went from the border first and we'll tie the Ukraine and Israel aid to it. So now it's like, no, just the border.
But now we have bills being passed by the Senate to fund Ukraine and Israel, and they're like, no, what about the border? Like, we're right back in this. Yeah.
They literally made the opposite. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's what I'm showing is, I don't know. Maybe I should try to put it. Let me see if I can put it in my back.
The only reason this works is because Republicans are cool just being stupid. Like, you guys don't care.
Can you guys see that?
You don't care if any of this makes sense. There you go. There's there's an arrow here and one over on the other side too. But that's the point.
Yeah, like, so it's just showing the circular reasoning they're using to keep us in a never-ending chaos spiral.
This is the death of the Republican Party. It's the death of conservatism. It's like there's no more good arguments for being a conservative. They're not offering you anything. The only thing they're offering you is this veil of protection against change, because you guys are afraid of change. It's terrifying. I get it. Like you want to go back to like when you were children and have life be exactly how it was then. By the way, the reason that you remember previous years so fondly is because you were younger. You had less things to deal with, and you don't remember all the things that were happening in the news. You didn't see that. You didn't have a 24/7 news cycle feeding this down your throat. Just because there are people who are parroting the same fears that you have just doesn't mean that they can fix it. We need to point that out. Republicans can identify all the problems in the world, but show me one that they've fixed in the last 20 years. What's the problem that they've, like, you want to talk about health insurance? Oh, it's too expensive. What did they do to fix it? Nothing. You want to talk about the exploding national debt? What did they do to fix it? Nothing. What have they done for incarceration rates? Nothing. What have they done for the border? Nothing. They literally just run on, hey guys, we're scared of this too, so vote for us. There's no solutions there.
I will have to say too, like, and I never thought, I don't want to say it, but like, I mean, you're really seeing who has any semblance of just a small spine now. Like, that's what we're seeing. And I have grown with some respect for Chip Roy and Dan Crenshaw. I just want to play, because Ronnie Candyman, I've definitely need to go somewhere and dry out Jackson, literally at a campaign event for another random person yesterday, suggested that they should beat Chip Roy until he was no longer alive for this comment. Let me play you the recording. Like, I'm not even, I wish to God I was joking about this. Ronnie Jackson needs rehab.
No, we're not going to just pass the buck and say that, oh, any president could walk in and secure the border. I saw former President Trump make that allegation earlier today on one of his social media posts. All the president has to do is declare the border is closed and it's closed. Well, with all due respect, that didn't happen in 2017, 18, 19, and 20.
Preach.
There were millions of people who came into the United States during those 4 years. No, we're not.
There's just no way around it. And anyone that has deeply studied this issue knows the only answer is changing federal immigration law, which this bill does. So based on that, so then whatever Ronnie Jackson was doing at some random campaign event for another person, Boast, I think it was, just said, oh, should we find the actual clip? I have it.
Play it, because I think you need to hear.
Oh, no, it's not a clip. It's not a clip. It's just the quote. It's the reporter that there's quoting it. Mark Maxwell, who's a reporter for local Texas radio station or TV station, said someone asked the GOP panel about rumors that Chip Roy might try to oust Speaker Johnson. And then here's the quote. Quote, this is Ronnie Jackson. I love Chip Roy. Do you? But Chip Roy is a major pain in the ass for all of us a few times, Representative Ronnie Jackson says, and it suggests Roy could use a, quote, code red beatdown from, quote, A Few Good Men. If you guys don't know what that is, that's when literally like Navy SEALs or Marines, like on the same team, go against their someone on their team and basically beat them until they're no longer.
Yeah, that's
alive.
what A Few Good Men is all about. Is they ordered a code red and they denied it. And Tom Cruise, who's a terrific attorney, was able to get Jack Nicholson to admit that he did order the code red, and he did it for the security of the country. But yeah, that's so I looked. Like, that's who you have here. Ronnie Jackson is saying that, like, this is how conservatives, the Republican Party, MAGA, this is how they view their club. They view their club as blood in, blood out. Like that's what they're looking at now.
Blood in, blood. That's a great. So I just want to read in the film A Few Good Men, because me, just looking up the term code red refers to an unauthorized, covert, disciplinary action taken by members of a military unit against one of their own. In the movie, Private Santiago, a young Marine, perishes in a code red incident at the Cuban naval base of Guantanamo Bay. And Ronnie Jackson really needs to close his mouth. They both are representatives in the same state. And you're throwing this out there at another person's random campaign event. Like, wild.
Well, do you want the truth? Do you want the truth? You can't handle the truth!
Oh my God, that really scared me. Like, I walked right into that one. Like, I did not. I think I almost had a small stroke. Okay, next I want to play some clips.
Too, actually, that gave me a headache.
I feel my heart beating out of my chest. Oh my God. I don't like being yelled at by you. The few times we've yelled at each other, I get scared. It's because I care about you so much.
I'm so harmless.
We don't need any changes to law. Then why did we write HR 2? Why did we do that?
He's saying that he's doing the same thing Chip Roy did, right? He's saying, they're saying we don't need to change the law. And he's like, then why did we write HR 2? Why did we do that if no laws need to be changed?
Any changes to law? Then why did we write HR 2? Why did we do that? Why didn't Trump just shut down the border? If you just think we don't need any changes to law, he couldn't. He had to make a deal with Mexico, and he did a great job doing that. But he had to rely on literally international agreements to get it under control. We do need changes to law. You got to change those loopholes in asylum. You got to raise the bar for asylum. You've got to make it very clear that there's no paroling. You need to institute remain in Mexico as an authority in law. These are really simple fixes that need to be done. And, that emergency authority that everybody interpreted, I think, as entries, you need to clean that up. You need to make that clear that that's not entries, it's encounters.
Yeah, so, and this is an intelligent person saying something intelligent. He's saying, hey, the 5,000 thing needs to be made more clear that it's not entries, right? That we're not paroling people in because it's not clear.
Probably I would decrease that number vastly, too. I think 5,000 is way beyond an emergency per day. I think it should be closer to 1,000. But reasonable people can actually make a good bill here. That's what the House should be doing.
Do you have high hopes for that?
Yeah, and also the bill does include, if you read it, like the threshold can be lowered by the president depending on the state of the emergency. But
that was Crenshaw, right? That was Crenshaw.
Yes, that was Crenshaw, and this is what a serious legislator does, right? And another clip I don't have, but it was a longer and I didn't want to record it. He made the point of
real quick. Just clarify.
Oh, go ahead.
Just clarify on that. What he's saying is, it is 5,000 per day, but it's rolling on a week. So there's been some confusion there. It's not 5,000 a week. It's 5,000 a day, but it's a rolling, meaning like if Thursday
rolling
to Thursday,
average.
but then from Friday to Friday it starts over, right? So you'll remove Thursday from those numbers, and if the rolling average for a week is 5,000, that's when you shut it down. So it's based on a week, but but that 5,000 number is daily. Just to make sure we're clear on that.
But, and also the point he's making about 5,000 is he's saying it's not entries, it's engagements. And that's not clear. And he's saying that's the PR problem of it all. Like, people need to understand 5,000 people are not being released into the interior of the United States every day. The singles are being detained. And it's true. It's a miscalculation of how the bill was presented. It needed to be made clearer. But a serious legislature, this is what they do. They look at a bill and then when it's brought to the floor, and he made this point in another clip, you have the opportunity to write amendments, right? Like the House GOP likes to do, attack on things that discriminate against trans children or whatever. But that's the point. The bill doesn't have to be perfect. You read it and then you can submit an amendment.
Well, do you think, this is a hypothesis. There's no way to test this because this will never happen. But I think if the Senate had negotiated a deal and they came out and they said, we've negotiated a deal, we've thought about this, and what we're going to do, because we can't come to an agreement, is we're going to shut down the border. No more entries. I think Republicans would still have opposed it. Because that's what they want, right?
Yes.
That's exactly what they want. The closer you get to what Republicans want, the more likely they are now at this point to oppose it. If you gave them everything they wanted, they would oppose it because Donald Trump doesn't want it to be fixed. And if Joe Biden could be like, hey, I was forced to close the border and now nobody's getting in and this sucks, I hate it, but I had to do it. Like that's still a win for him. It's gonna be like, well, He did what he didn't want to do for what was best for the country. Like, it's a win all the way around for him. And that's, truthfully, all the Republicans care about right now, which is so embarrassing, you guys. Like, it's just, Dan, I don't think Dan can get in the box, by the way. You guys keep inviting him. I tried, and I don't think he can get up there.
Oh, it's like Dan Crenshaw?
No, but you guys should be,
like
you honest to God, should be so embarrassed by your politicians, and instead you just sit up here and defend them. It's crazy. Just a reminder, we're engaging in CoinCot. We're at 200,000. Let's see if we can get to 300,000 by the end of the live. That's another hour. There's the Venmo and the Cash App. If you'd like your comments read out loud, we will happily read them. So if you do send a donation and you want a comment associated with that, just make sure it's in the comments and I'll read them out loud.
Okay, so I just want to play. So later in the day, this is another clip of Crenshaw. Like, you can just hear how disillusioned and angry. You know what I mean? Like, he's just like, I am in a village of idiots. Like, he can't even take it anymore.
The numbers made. I think there's been a real lack of leadership on this. We need a round two here, because otherwise we're getting nothing on the border. And I think that's an unacceptable thing for our voters.
Most GOP leadership coming out almost immediately, though. They said it was dead on arrival. Almost hours without this.
I just wish they were playing 4D chess and had a plan, but we're trying to work on that plan.
How do you think the voters in their districts will respond?
He said, I just wish they were playing 4D chess and had a plan, but...
Yeah, we covered this yesterday. They're not playing 4D chess, 3D chess, or even checkers. They're rolling out the pieces and Marge is chewing on them. That's all that's happening here. They have to keep taking them out of Marge. Marge, what's in your mouth? Marge! Marge!
Don't eat them.
Spit it out! Out!
Don't
Marge.
eat the checkers.
Out!
It's absolutely hilarious.
8 checker
like
pieces just come drooling out of her mouth.
Okay, so I have another clip I want to play from. Now I think it's appropriate to play this clip. This is what Hakeem Jeffries said yesterday.
We actually want to solve the problem. Republicans have been ordered by Donald Trump not to solve the challenges at the border, but to continue to play political games because they want to use the border as an electoral issue in November, and that's going to backfire. The Republicans thought they set a border trap for Democrats, and they fell into it themselves.
Amen to that. This is actually like it's so true. Like, by doing this, they actually highlighted what we've all been trying to say, that the point is the chaos. This is the most ineffective Congress. They don't want to do anything except Donald Trump's bidding. And it's like, we couldn't have planned it better by trying to just do the right thing and give them what they wanted so we could get Ukraine and Israel funding. They fell into their own trap.
Like, yeah, we can't, there's a reason we don't get opposition on this, by the way. And it's the same reason that there's no real opposition in the media. Like, nobody has gone on TV and made a very good argument for why Republicans rejected this bill. In fact, when pushed, it's been insane. They're just like, oh, it's a terrible bill. Like, I wouldn't even, it's so bad I wouldn't consider it. Well, what's so bad? It's just so bad. It's just so bad. Like,
exactly.
I haven't found a clip yet. Maybe it exists. If there's somebody in here who's seen a clip of Republicans actually defending this, I'd like to see it. But so far, the only defense I've seen is generic, it's so bad, or the ones that are being honest that are like, no, we just need Donald Trump. It's other than that, I haven't seen a defense of this.
Yeah. Well, Nikki Haley had something to say. And we were talking about, Jay and I were talking about this yesterday, like, Nikki Haley, it must be so interesting, like the corporate donors specifically, the reason Trump wanted Nikki Haley out of the election, right, was first DeSantis, who wasted $150 million of corporate super PAC money just in Iowa. Then they moved to Nikki Haley, right? Let's listen to Nikki Haley's quote. And then you tell me, like, what should these donors do? The writing is on the wall that Trump's probably the nominee, but what should they do?
Republicans lost a bill on the border. Republicans lost a bill on supporting Israel. The RNC chair lost her job. Donald Trump was found that he's not immune from any of the charges that are coming up. It is total chaos.
Like who, if you were a corporate donor, these huge super PACs, where should you give the money? Who should you give the money to? A grifter who's going to spend it on his legal fees?
Ideally, yeah.
For the next year?
Yeah, ideally.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, Kaylee's so behind in the polls, but at least she's like competent and, you know, not facing 91 felonies. Like, they can't give the money to the RNC. Right. And here's why.
Well, and Trump's advocating not to give money to the RNC. I just heard an interview of him 3 days ago.
Wants it to go to him.
Yeah,
directly.
It should go to me. Don't give money to the RNC. For all these states like Arizona where the RNC is bankrupt, like you want to point to somebody, where did all that money go? The individual donations, those are all going directly to Trump, which are paying his legal bills. Real quick before you play that, Wayne just said, keep up the good work. Topic I would love to hear is on how can others help out with the election. Have some ideas and plans already, but would love to try to do more. Wayne, I would say this. One, join our Discord. This is something that we've been discussing for a month now, and part of our moderator team is coming up with ideas and hosting nights and trying to come up with creating resources of how locally you can get involved with your election. But my first suggestion, Wayne, if you're not already in the Discord, join the Discord, start talking to people there, and let it be known that you want to work on these projects too. We'd love to have you on board.
Yeah, and like we're thinking of grassroots, like just like Wayne, I think what you're asking for, grassroots ways. Specifically, we've been talking about, because Project 2025 Heritage Foundation is coming up with like grassroots campaigns for, you know, the moms of liberty types who want to get active and ruin things from the bottom up while the new authoritarian president ruins them from the top down, you know, and somewhere they'll meet in the middle. So we want to come up with something similar of like some sort of toolkit or grassroots toolkits of, hey, if you don't have a lot of time, you're working, whatever, here's some simple things we can do to get involved with the election. So yeah, thank you for asking that, Wayne. And sometimes we get away from that stuff.
If you'd like to join the Discord, message Jen or one of our other moderators that are here. If you want to just put like a hand up in the comments, then you'll see who our moderators are. Just send them a DM and they'll send you a link to the Discord.
And what I was talking about when I said we can't give the money to the RNC is, you guys are not going to believe this. The guy that Trump wants to possibly, like, what of the two, like, finalist candidates they're kicking around to run the RNC? Remember how we said that Trump likes to surround himself with people he's got something on, specifically essayers? Or people doing weird stuff. His favorite. It's no big deal. This guy, his name is Presler, I mean, he just apparently snuck into the RNC's headquarters in Virginia after hours, had a sexual encounter, and then put the film on Craigslist. No big deal. Then they randomly found it. Like, he did, some people found it, and then they had to, like, confront him and be like, did you sneak into the building and do some weird and put it on Craigslist? And then he resigned. Yes, that's right. This is not a joke. Wait, did you find the article?
No, but let's just point out that it was not that long ago that Republicans were up in arms about two staffers in Congress who made a video inside of I believe, a hearing room. Remember, you were up in arms about that, and fine, if you're up in arms about that, I'm assuming you're up in arms about this. I will just draw a distinct difference that nobody in the DNC is recommending that either of those staffers be promoted to chairman of the goddamn DNC. And by the way, this
it's number
Scott
6
Presler,
on the outline, Jen.
Not only is Scott Presler guilty of what we just said, he's also ill-equipped to to run the RNC. Yeah, how old is he?
He's a very young kid. This is what I know. So we can all look up this article together. It's called "Trump Allies Want Scott Presler, 1S, to Head the RNC. There's just one problem." Okay, so we could look that up. It's in The Spectator. This is a young kid. Let's see. Let's read some stuff about him. Hold on. Why is this? Oh no! I just got a paywall that popped up. I should have screenshotted this. Can you see the article? It's number 6 in the.
No, I had this.
I think I looked at it too many times. I could see it yesterday.
He's 30. He's 35, by the way. I was just pulling up information on him. He's 35, so not a kid. Long hair, which is going to be a problem for conservatives. He has Fabio.
Look him up on Twitter. Look him up on Twitter. What he's been doing is every day for the last, I think he's on day 298. He tweets at Ronna McDaniel and asks her, which this is a valid question, and I do think he's talking about a failing of the RNC. He's saying, Ronna, what's your plan to mobilize young Republicans? Are you going to create an army of influencers to combat the leftist influencers on places like TikTok is what he's asking. What's the RNC's plan for that? Which I do think is a very valid question. It's a little weird.
The answer is we're gonna give a boatload of money to Charlie Kirk and he's gonna fail spectacularly. That's the truth. You managed to elevate who? You elevated Nick Fuentes, Charlie Kirk. There's some kid. What's that stupid kid's name? He's like a 17-year-old. He's a big deal now. He's down in Florida. His daddy's some sort of I forget his name. I haven't seen his stuff for a while. His dad's a big Trump booster. Yeah, you've all seen that girl who shit her pants and that guy that runs around with her and sometimes shows up on TikTok to get dunked on by everybody. Yeah, the problem that he has, Scott Pressler and Ronna McDaniel have the same problem, is that the pool of people you have to choose from are all goddamn morons. And that's a problem. When you want somebody to combat information, you're going to need somebody who's not a goddamn moron.
Yeah, and picture a cross between, that's great point. Why does this exist, 449? He's a cross between Kid Rock and Ted Nugent. Just visualize a cross between, and I swear, and I don't mean this as kind of. I mean, quite literally, that's who this person looks like. And I was looking up yesterday, how he rose to, not fame, I wouldn't say fame, but how he got, eyes on him in the RNC. He basically ran this insane campaign to disparage and discredit Muslim Americans, is what he started out doing, is a tour of Muslims don't have rights and they should leave this country. So that's what...
He got $5 million from Turning Point to turn Wisconsin red in 2024.
Oh,
we'll see how that goes. Again,
so he does work for Charlie Kirk.
Yeah. Again, Charlie Kirk and Republicans, you've got yourself a problem. You hired a goddamn moron and somebody with an extremely bizarre past that doesn't speak to anybody. He speaks to the people. This is what Charlie Kirk has a problem with, is that Charlie Kirk thinks that his message is that it hasn't reached enough people yet. And that's why there's not as many people following. The problem with Charlie Kirk is the more he speaks, the smaller his group gets. It's actually, the longer Charlie Kirk is around, now Turning Point is still getting tons of money.
Just let him keep talking. Give him the rope to...
They're still getting money, but they're not gaining influence. They're not gaining the numbers that they need. They're not gaining young voters. They're just getting more and more money from RNC donors.
And just to give you an idea, Charlie Kirk said, there's 3 articles. This is 53, 54, and 55 in the outline. What I'm just going to kind of basically touch on is what Charlie Kirk is saying and up to. He basically said that Charlie Kirk decided to trust the Lord, despite warnings that... No, Charlie Kirk decided to trust the Lord despite warnings that attacking MLK could be a career ender. And he's now carried it into February. The Lord told Charlie Kirk, yes, during Black History Month, discredit MLK. I mean, I can't stand it. It's literally sickening to me when I have to listen to these clips. I used to listen to his podcast. I can't listen anymore because every disgusting thought Charlie Kirk has in his head that he's I can't say this, he's now on his podcast daily. He now believes that his job is to disparage Martin Luther King Jr. and undo the civil rights movement.
There's been a running joke. I think it was a Key and Peele sketch of people who, like, after they lose the game, you know, when you win, you're always like, first and foremost, I want to thank Jesus. And, like, there was that skit that was people blaming Jesus. Like, that's what Charlie Kirk's doing now. Charlie Kirk's like, hey, I know I'm getting backlash, but not my idea. Jesus told me I needed to go after MLK during Black History Month. I didn't want to do it, but Jesus was like, you got to, dude. You just
a brown socialist said, go ahead, disparage this black socialist who's responsible for the civil rights movement in America.
I think I might need to make a scapegoating for the Lord shirt, I think.
That's so true. Jesus told me to. Oh my gosh. We should make a shirt about Charlie Kirk. That's a great idea. Yeah, that's a really good one. We should start doing more things like that, because I think let me I don't want to do this, but let me just play one of these clips that is a little bit acceptable, because most of these I would never even play out loud.
The argument that I'm making is that the multi-decade incubator of DEI was housed in the Department of Justice post the Civil Rights Act. The attitude, the enforcement, the precision that the DEI bureaucrats operate with was all workshopped in the Department of Justice in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And just now are we seeing it in corporate America, and we've seen this cancer metastasize. What started as a good intention to try to eradicate the injustices of saying that, you know, only whites can eat at the restaurant has tragically metamorphosized into a beast that has even more hatred than some of the elements of the antebellum South.
Are you kidding me? The antebellum South. He invoked.
Well, listen.
He said DEI is worse than the antebellum South. The antebellum South had a breeding program, a forced breeding program for African Americans, where they forced them to breed with their own family members in cases. And you're telling me that DEI, hiring qualified African American pilots, is worse than the antebellum South? Like, disgusting.
What's even more, like, not more disgusting, but on the same, like, he's always the same amount of disgusting. But for him, this is the way of the modern day racist, right? They pretend that they're not racist. They pretend that, like, they really wanted things fixed. But then listen to how he positioned that. He said it was first of all, it was workshopped in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Fucking good. Yeah, you mean they talked about it for 40 fucking years? 50,
but
60
workshopped.
Years? Yeah, hold on. 60 years? Yes, that's what it should have been doing. It should have been workshopped. It should have been adjusted. We should adjust to the times that we're in. But then what he says is, it was meant for a good thing. It was meant to undo this idea that white people and black people could eat at the same restaurant. What? That's all it was. Civil rights was just, they had all these divided restaurants, and all we needed to do is make sure that people could eat at the same place, and then everything was fixed. Like, listen to how he positions that. He thinks that racism ends when you're allowed to eat in the same restaurant. And that's what this is the literal view of the right. Well, you can eat in our restaurant. What do you want? Now you want us to stop being racist too? Yeah, now you want us to just let you fly our planes? No, you're in the restaurant. We already accomplished it.
Yeah, and like when you say the word workshop, I mean, we're talking about the fight that minorities have fought tooth and nail to exist, right? We're talking just to exist alongside white males in this country. The movement for just equal rights. And what's his name? Qasim Rashid, who's an amazing candidate for Congress, and he's on TikTok. Sometime I really want to interview him. He always says that the fight for equity to white males in this country who have long held all the power, it feels like discrimination, right? Like, to talk about the fight for just equal rights, like, oh, we were workshopping something here, shows how little this adversity this man has ever and will ever face in this country.
Well, I think you're right. That's how he's using workshop. I'm saying that, like, if you're using workshop in the way that, you know, I've used it in business, when you're workshopping something, you're saying, like, it's going to be collaborative and it's going to be adaptable. And when something doesn't work, you're going to move and you're going to adapt to the next thing. I think it's an anti-conservative ideology, which is probably why he doesn't like that. But that's the idea with this. Like, the idea with DEI is that it needs to be ever evolving. We need to adjust to what's happening in front of us. And the issues now, like the core root issues may be the same, but the issue on paper can be totally different, and you need to change that. Like, that's why DEI is so important. That's why keeping that in the conversation is so important, because when you stop looking for it, you don't see it anymore. You lose, you go backwards. And honestly, that's what they want to do here. I didn't view workshop as something that was derogatory or negative. If you're using it in the way that you're bringing people together consistently, and you're open to new ideas, and you're open to trying new things and evolving, I think that's a great thing. Like, that's our country is workshopped. We wrote a constitution, a living, breathing document, and ever since then we've been evolving, and we've been changing it, and we've been interpreting it, and we make changes, we take things out, we do things all the time. That's literally how our country was formed. And it's like a slippery slope to getting better. Is that, like, that's the conservative thing that they're mad about? We don't want to get better, guys. We want to try things once and leave it at that. Like, things can't take 60 years. We can't progressively get better. Felice, you're muted.
I thought I was unmuting myself and muted myself. I think for me and probably other minorities, just the struggle for equality, and not just the struggle against what? To stop being lynched, to stop horrific acts of violence constantly being committed against us, and then to use the term workshop. Like, my thesis was on, like, what now Trump is praising Operation, it's a racial slur. It's how Eisenhower literally deported citizens and non-citizens from the America. If you don't know about the Mexican repatriation, and then to say, like, oh, and then we kind of were workshopping the idea that maybe we shouldn't forcibly remove large groups of brown people from the United States against their will at any moment. It trivializes the hundreds of years of suffering that indigenous people, that African Americans, that Asian Americans built this country while being decimated. And then to say, oh, we were workshopping something, now we don't like it anymore. We're not feeling it so much anymore.
Yeah, now that we have
You're not feeling our equal rights?
Now that it's getting too close to equality. Alicia sent a message. I appreciate you both so much for the knowledge, facts, laughs, and vent sessions. Your hard work is appreciated so much. If I may, I'd like to send love and light to you both. Love and light received. Thank you, Alicia.
That makes me want to cry. Thank you so much. Like, and just, oh my God, I'm not going to, maybe I will cry.
Do it.
Like,
let it out.
Really
let it out.
I at any moment, like, this is a very emotional, like, job. It's like being on a roller coaster at the hands of, like, this political circus we're in. And, like, just so you guys know, like, you guys give us something too. Like, we're very thankful for all of you as well. Right? Don't make me cry.
No, she's right. It's there are times when this gets the best of us, and Felice and I are both a little bit morbid in how
you got really quiet to me.
I'm more quiet?
A little bit.
Maybe I was just being more quiet. Yeah, like, we get a little more morbid with how we deal with our stress when this gets to us. Like, generally speaking, it's just 11 o'clock at night. Both of us, like, maybe we won't wake up tomorrow and it'll be fine. Like, it gets more. So those types of messages, the DMs that we often get, that it does mean the world. So thank you so much for saying that.
God, now I'm all emotional. Okay, let's get off Charlie Kirk, because I do think, like, what he's doing is vile, but, like, Tudor Dixon, who's an insane MAGA person that ran against Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan for governor, and she's out of her mind, is now just on this campaign against Charlie Kirk, saying he's ruining the Republican Party for women, for minority groups. These are the groups that they're trying to recruit, and in doing so, they're disenfranchising them. So it's very emotionally taxing, I think, to read this stuff, to know what's going on. But in a way, it may work out for us, because I don't think that anybody, essentially from the general population, can hear too much of this without disgust.
Yeah, even though the few people I do know that I interact with that are moderate Republicans, specifically women, this message doesn't work for them, and this is disqualifying. Like, this isn't one of those things that, like, sometimes conservatives can overlook something, and we do it as liberals too. Like, we have to overlook stuff with Joe Biden. But when you're talking about, like, the actual existence of a person, or the right for that person to exist in the way that we all exist, it's a non-starter for a lot of women, for a lot of people who are marginalized. It's again, it's gross to see. It's important that we point it out, and it's draining. But I do think that there's hope for America in seeing this being rejected by people who may not want Joe Biden as their president, but will likely vote for him anyways.
And it's just, that's the interesting thing about Charlie Kirk, because I wouldn't, and I think you've said, like, he's intelligent in debates. Like, the man can make a point, but all the data that we're seeing coming out of these primaries, right? Like, that the people voting for Nikki Haley are, like you're saying, they might not like Dark B, but they will not vote for Trump. So, and knowing and seeing these numbers come out in the primary, and Charlie Kirk continuing to disenfranchise women and minority voters that they need to move right is, like you said, he's trusting the Lord, Jay. He's trusted the Lord.
I think one thing we've learned about Charlie Kirk is that his racism is stronger than his misogyny. Because early on, when they were talking about abortion, Charlie Kirk was pretty honest about that. He's like, look, this can't be our issue. We can't go after this issue. This is a losing issue for you. But when it comes to DEI, obvious losing it. Like, by every metric, losing issue for you. Anti-woke, losing message for you. By every metric, this is a losing message. But unfortunately for Charlie Kirk, that racism is just strong enough that he's not willing to do what's best for his party in order to overlook it. He's willing to set aside his misogyny for the party, but not his racism.
So true. I didn't even think about that. That is very true. It's I mean, to come out in a presidential election year and think what I need to push here is disparaging Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Leading up to the presidential election. Black History Month, yes, I should be doing this during this time. It won't be triggering to anyone.
And
let's
again,
push through.
Let's also remember that who Charlie Kirk, like, who his audience is supposed to be. Charlie Kirk is paid for one reason. His reason is to attract younger voters. Do you think younger voters, how do they feel about abortion? How do they feel about DEI? How do they feel about wokeness? How do they feel about inclusivity? Generally speaking, like, by wider percentages than any other electorate base, like, they are overwhelmingly against him, and yet he has chosen to make DEI and anti-wokeism the foundation of his message. For everybody complaining about Ronna McDaniel or rhinos, why don't you start pointing the blame at the Republicans you've put in charge who keep fucking things up, and you keep giving them more money to double down on it because your old ass thinks that, like, young people think the same way as you do. No, boomer. Like, they don't. They just don't. And you don't even think like you're on the far right of boomers. You think far right boomers are the same as, like, as Gen Z? No. The only people that agree with you are, like, the white nationalist Gen Zs. That's not a large percentage of people. And guess what? You already had that vote. So I don't know why you're pandering to them. They're not going anywhere. They're going to keep voting for you. You don't need to pander.
He already had the libertarian. Yes. And, like, actually, I would say with Gen Z, the libertarian message was a successful message. Like, I think, like you said, he followed that line of logic and he had most of his following are those young libertarian male voters. You did that. Okay. And then just continuing to go right and more extreme is definitely the worst calculation I've ever seen Charlie Kirk make. That's the weird thing about Republicans. It's like, you don't have to beat them because at some point they just decide to beat themselves.
Yeah,
Isn't that what we're seeing?
It's such a wild. I mean, this is the fruits of an echo chamber, and, like, luckily we're enjoying the fruits of this particular echo chamber. We like it, but for everybody who I mean, we often get accused of being in an echo chamber, and I think in some senses that's correct. Not by design. We would love for those who think we're in an echo chamber to come tell us why we're not. But that's what Donald Trump has done to this Republican Party, is he's insulated it from outside opinions. It's become an echo chamber. You sit around, you say things, and then you get massive applause from Republicans, and you think, oh, this must be a winning message. Look at all the applause I'm getting. Unfortunately, you don't realize that like all the people applauding are there. All the people that will applaud to that, they're already there. You already got, they're there. They're in the seats. They're watching it.
Tens. Yeah. Tens and tens.
Yeah. Everybody else is like, what the fuck is that? Like, you've got your audience. It's after Romney lost, the Republican Party spent millions trying to figure out what they can do to stop losing the popular vote, and everything they came up with, like stop going after women, stop going after minorities, like have a more welcoming immigration message. All of that, Donald Trump abandoned it, and then you just see the racists in the party like, hell yeah, let's go, brother, and that's why you're losing. Enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think they get confused because of their like Russian state media, like or like their new version of Russian American media, which is an echo chamber. Like, so they're like, okay, people are liking this, but it's like, no, actually the majority of people are watching you silently, wondering what you're doing. Let's go to a Jared Moskowitz clip.
Real quick, just an analogy here. When I was a kid, my soccer team was the best team in Utah by far. And we would throttle everybody. And we also didn't play on Sunday. And so when I was a kid, there were a couple big tournaments. There was one in San Diego. There was one in Las Vegas. There was one in Florida, and there was one in Minnesota. And the only one that didn't require you to play on Sunday was in Minnesota. So that's the only one we ever went to. So we always had this idea that we were unbelievable, like that we were such a great team. But we realized that, no, we were just good for Utah. And when we would go out of state and we'd play in like these regional events, we would get to the knockout rounds, and we would just get killed. We'd get killed by the teams from Texas, the teams from California, from Florida, Arizona always had great players. We would just get dominated, and that's who the GOP is. Like the GOP, they think they're winning. When you see Donald Trump winning these primaries by massive numbers, you see the GOP celebrating. They're like, hell yeah, like, look at him, he's so popular, he's just going to keep winning. But you don't understand that, like, you're not to the stage yet. You're not to the stage where, like, these percentages actually come into play. If you think he's not going to win states by massive numbers. He's not wildly popular. He's very unpopular. And they're going to find that out. And they've set themselves up with this belief that because he's winning the Republican primary, that means he's going to be popular nationwide. I hate to say it. The most telling thing about this primary is that Nikki Haley is gaining ground while Donald Trump is the clear winner. He's the clear winner. He's going to win, and Nikki Haley's gaining ground. What does that tell you? That's a bad sign.
I concur. Okay, so let's go over Jared Moskowitz. You know, he always has a beautiful way of making it okay to laugh about the nightmare we're trapped in.
Congress continues to devolve in slow motion before our eyes.
I mean that border bill, the bipartisan border deal, with the lead negotiator being Republican Oklahoma Senator James Lankford, who Donald Trump endorsed in 2022 as being tough on the border, basically gives Republicans their wish list of everything that they've been asking for, and when given it, because Donald Trump gave the phone call to MAGA Mike Johnson and said, I want to run my campaign on whining about the border.
I love this.
Republicans are killing the bill.
This, right? I love it. It's a crisis. We have to solve it right now. I mean, this is literally what happened. Let me give you the 60 seconds on this. So they say, well, we're not going to help Ukraine anymore because we're not going to secure Ukraine's border if we can't secure our border. Okay, great. We'll work on a deal. So 3 months go by as they're working on this deal, and all of a sudden they come up with the most conservative border bill in a generation. And all of a sudden Republicans are like, oh holy shit! They actually listened to us. They actually did what we said. Well, we can't pass this, because if we pass this, we won't be able to use it as an election issue. I mean, we need more fentanyl and more people crossing the border and supposed terrorists. You know, we need all that. I mean, Donald Trump right now, to be clear, is hoping deep down something bad happens at the border, or someone got through on the border that's a bad guy and they commit something, so that he can use it in the next election. That is where we are. If you don't accept that is what Donald Trump wants and is trying to accomplish, then you are not paying attention. And so, look, this thing is dead. I think probably almost everything else might be dead this session because, you already see Jim Jordan saying, well, let the American people decide, right? We're back to the let's not fill the Supreme Court seat. Let's let the American people decide mentality. And Congress continues to devolve in slow motion before our eyes.
Remember when they did that with the Supreme Court seat, Mitch McConnell? That's exactly what Jim Jordan said yesterday. Let's let the American people decide. Here we are again with that circular thing I showed you, the circular reasoning. We can't fix Ukraine's border until we fix our border. We fix it. Wait a minute. Now we didn't. It's the constant circular reasoning that we can't escape.
Listen, you're going to the well one too many times, okay? You can't always throw a fucking Hail Mary. And when they did what they did to Merrick Garland, that was a fucking Hail Mary. That's what it was. And it works once. And now people are ready for it. I'm sorry, Jim Jordan. I know you don't have any real answers to anything, but you've gone to the well on this too many times. Do you remember in 2020, we can't impeach the president, let the American people decide. They fucking decided! They fucking decided, didn't they? And that's why your guy's not in office anymore. And has he gotten more or less popular? Less popular. So you want to keep letting the American people decide? Sure, go for it. That's fine. You'll keep losing, and that's fine. But the only reason Jim Jordan is saying this is because before everything, Jim Jordan is a lot of things, but number one is that Jim Jordan is a massive pussy, just like the biggest pussy that exists in Congress. He will do and say whatever it takes for Donald Trump to give him just a little bit of attention. He'll throw his own career away. He'll do anything. Why? Compromise, probably. But Jim Jordan
God only knows.
You guys can't keep banking on this shit that hasn't worked. It worked one time, and you think it's going to work forever, and you keep going back to that. It's not. By the way, Sully sends a gift and a message, has donated for Felice's presidential campaign, so.
Oh, thank you.
Right now she's gonna cry.
I love that. Guys, tap the screen. I know, I'm emotional. It's been a long week. No, Thursday, we know, you guys, and you can remember this about me. By Thursday, I'm hanging on by a thread. Yeah. And then tomorrow I'll be okay, because in my mind, I'm okay, it's Friday, just survive. But Thursday's the day where I'm that's it. I might not make it.
And there's a good chance you'll make it.
You guys have totally made me. I know. It seems like I keep making it past Thursday, so I need to stop being so dramatic. And now I just want to play. Oh, he's so vile. Tommy Tuberville, Alabama senator. That circular reasoning.
Oh, this will be well thought out.
Oh my God, I have so many funny. This is so funny so the circular reasoning that we're talking about. This is Tommy Tuberville's whole life is just one circular argument.
You're going to love when you get done with the live today, by the way. Tommy Tuberville has a nice, literally as soon as the hearings ended today, the Supreme Court, he was there at the Supreme Court reporting. So you'll love it. You'll get a chance to see it.
No, he was not.
Oh, you're fucking right, he was.
This man.
To all of us across the country that are Americans, that our leader, supposed leader in the White House, he can't remember names. He can't.
Oh wait, we have to go back to that one. That's hilarious, but that's hold on. Let me.
He can't remember names
No, and then
Nikki
that's what I'm gonna say. That's what it is. I didn't want to ruin it, but that's basically what happens. He can't remember names, and then can't remember. This guy is Auburn's former football coach. Forgets the Kansas City Chiefs. The name of the Kansas City Chiefs. That's basically what happens.
Roll Tide.
That's exactly what this was about, Chris. It was about Ukraine money. It was not about the border.
So this is the circular argument. No, you guys said it was about the border. You guys said you wouldn't fund Ukraine until there was sweeping border reform. Remember, not protecting Ukraine's border until we protect our own. So this is the circular argument.
People knew that it wasn't going to happen. We wouldn't go.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Just a reminder that this is the same guy who has spent his entire time in the Senate making sure that our military didn't have leaders, that nobody could get raises, that nobody could be promoted, that entire divisions of our military went without a leader. Just to be clear, Mr. I care about the southern border, I care about the safety and security of our citizens. This is the person who has left our military out to dry since the first day he got in office. That's all he's done. That's literally all he's done.
people with uteruses. He says that if they're in his state of Alabama, he will not permit them health care. That's this man. And not just women in the military, people with uteruses in the military, but also men in the military, their wives. Let me make sure they also can't get any health care. This is this man.
The deal on the border. So now we jumped into the Ukraine funding, and they're going to find a way to get it done, but hopefully we can block it. We need to protect.
Do you see what we're doing here? The circular. So first of all, it was never about the border. Well, you said it was about the border. And he's like, now they're trying to do Ukraine funding. Well, you said you didn't want the border. So now we're just doing Ukraine funding. And now he's like, but we need to block that. Like, we will never get out of this cycle.
Never. By the way, Airborne Mom has sent, I believe, a conditional gift, and the condition is that to have your cat join the panel. I believe that's the...
Oh my God, you guys, he is the best. But he would scream and no one will ever be able to hear anything. I have a narcissist for a cat.
You've got a type.
Yes, I do. I created him. I love him so much. I loved him into being a narcissist. Okay, so yeah, we don't have to play. Let me play the Tommy Tuberville clip just for fun. Tommy Tuberville says Joe Biden forgets things and then forgets. Like he's a professional football coach. It's so embarrassing.
To all of us across the country that are Americans, that our leader, supposedly leader in the White House, he can't remember names. He can't carry on a conversation. He has to listen to the press corps to give him hints about what he's talking about. We're really bad trouble when it comes to Joe Biden, and hopefully we've only got 10, 12 more months with him.
Do you want to make a pick in the Super Bowl or not?
Well, San Francisco's got the best defense. Obviously, the best quarterback is going to be on the side of the of Kansas City Chiefs, but they got a running back. And San Francisco is pretty dang good. And usually, running game and defense is going to win the big games. San Francisco.
Yep.
He's like, you've got to see his face.
All right,
like, if you're going to say how someone can't remember things, then remember what you're talking about.
And also, first of all, you dumb bitch, as somebody who is a San Francisco fan and a football fan and wants very badly for San Francisco to win this game, generally speaking, the best quarterback wins. I don't know what the Christ he's talking about. It's almost always the best quarterback. That's why Kansas City has the best quarterback, and they keep going to the Super Bowl. That's how this works. That's why San Francisco couldn't make it to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, and they like regularly, and then all of a sudden Brock Purdy shows up and we're right there. The quarterback matters, and this is why Tommy Tuberville is a garbage ass senator instead of still a football coach.
Guys, we're almost to 300K. Thank you guys so much. You guys are gonna have the strongest fingers on TikTok. I don't what that means, but congratulations on that.
Your significant others will be happy. It'll make everybody
listen,
happy.
Do we want to listen to Tim Scott just quickly be awful? Tim Scott has gotten worse.
No, he's brilliant. Let's listen to him.
He's an awful, like, what's wrong? Tim Scott, I did not think he could get more horrible, but since faking his engagement to someone nobody ever knew existed,
has anybody seen her since? Thank you guys.
No,
we hit 300K.
Never.
Thank you.
No one has seen her since. And this is all, the reason he's gotten so crazy is they're all thinking, VP, could it be me? Like, let's get as crazy as possible to prove our loyalty.
Finally, I just want to ask whether or not this new bill that's just about foreign policy, whether you're going to vote in favor of it.
Oh, let's, just because in case we didn't make it clear, now they've dropped the border from the border bill that they asked for. And they're just trying... Yeah, they said we had to fix the border first, but now we're dropping that and trying to just fund Ukraine and Israel.
Foreign money for Israel, for what's happening in Ukraine. What do you think of that standalone foreign policy bill?
David, I voted no already a few minutes ago, and here's the reason why. Unfortunately, what this administration and Chuck Schumer, they are doing is using the crisis in Israel to support other priorities of the party. We should first secure our southern border. Second, provide resources.
We should first secure our southern border. Do you guys hear the circular logic? They just demanded we secure the border. They gave them the bill, handed them everything they wanted. Nope. They cut off the border. Just the funding for Ukraine and Israel. Nope, we need to secure the border. It will never stop.
Border bill will come up. Oh, we're not doing the border. We gotta. What about Israel? What about Israel? Yeah. God damn it. Yeah, this is why when we say send us your best and your brightest debaters, you keep sending us Gorilla and David, because this shit only works on people who just like want to be misinformed. They're like, please just tell me more lies. I'll repeat them. I promise.
Willful ignorance. No, truly, like that's what you're saying. The only people left supporting Trump, you have to be willfully ignorant. You have to be it's so glaring in your face that none of this makes any sense, and you just have to be like, I don't care. I do not care that none of this makes sense. I'm into it.
What's amazing is that our coverage has devolved from like, it used to be, we'll point out the absurdity of Trump, but now Trump's like the sane one. Like the people that, like Tim Scott, like all these people are right of Trump now. Like they're saying more crazy shit than Trump. That's what's wild, is that like Trump is now starting to look like the moderate of the group. Like when you talk about abortion, like he doesn't have extreme views on abortion. At least he doesn't say them, right? He's smart enough not to do that. He's smart enough to stay out of certain things. But the people he surrounds himself with are just goddamn lunatics, and they're remarkably dumb. Tim Scott, like, don't ever try and sell me on the idea that Tim Scott is an intellectual. Don't. Like, I've never heard him speak in any way that makes me think he has an original thought of his own.
Just think about it. Like, what does it really say? Truly, I think about this, about the state of South Carolina. Who is it? Cosmic Pizza that we talked to is from there. What does it say about the state of Southern Carolina that their two senators are Senator Flip Flop Lindsey Graham and I faked an engagement hoping to be Trump's VP Tim Scott? This is the best and the brightest. That's all we need to know about South Carolina. Like,
real quick, I'm gonna butcher this name, but Cyrenia. I'm so sorry. Cyrenia. I butchered that. I apologize. I owe you a million apologies.
Cyrenia?
Yeah, that sounds good. Send a gift. Thank you both for the education and the eye candy. I assume the second one is for Felice, but thank you very much for... Actually, it kind of sounds like both of those are for Felice. Sounds like they're both for you.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Jay, we all love you. I don't think I know,
but I'm more of a court jester than anything. Like I understand my role here. I understand what people show up for.
That was Trump's lawyer in oral arguments today. He was the jester. I've never seen someone just not needed in oral arguments. You can leave if you want. We don't need you here. Oh, let me just do James Comer real quick. What was Comer up to? At least he didn't engage in the circular arguments. Comer just announced his investigation into John Kerry, which... if that doesn't make any sense, yeah, that's right, people. Comer just went on TV yesterday and is like, I'm investigating John Kerry. Like, what? He's wasting our tax dollars now investigating John Kerry.
Yeah, this is more evidence of obstruction. The White House is obstructing our investigation. Look, no one knows what John Kerry authority was. No one knows what John Kerry was negotiating when he would go to China. Joe Biden put him in a cabinet level position that he just created, but yet he was never confirmed by the Senate. So no one knows really what his job was, but we know he went over there a lot. We also know, Rob, that he was colluding with these left-wing environmental organizations.
Pause real quick. Yeah, you know why he wasn't confirmed? Because you motherfuckers won't confirm anybody. That's why. That's why he wasn't confirmed. Does anybody recognize how this works?
It's an open and shut case, Jay.
Yeah,
John Kerry has been to China. John Kerry has been to China. Case closed. John Kerry went to China and he knew Joe Biden, and that is the evidence. So
what did he do wrong? We don't know, but we don't know. So that means probably something. That's every one of these morons' arguments every time they open an investigation. What's the crime? We don't know. What are you investigating? Not sure. But we know he was in China. Okay, enjoy the investigation. Like, this is not the role of Congress. It's not. This is not the role of Congress.
I can't wait for the John Kerry, just the random John Kerry here. So, John Kerry, you've been to China and you've had a conversation with Joe Biden. Is that correct? Okay, you're guilty.
Remember the last time John Kerry showed up, he just pulled, what's that stupid senator from Kentucky's name, that not Rand Paul, the other one?
Massey?
Thomas Massey, yeah.
Oh, no, he's a rep.
He just pulled Massey's pants down, and we're like, this is what Massey's working with. When Massey's like, are you a scientist? He's like, no. He's like, well, you have a political science degree. He's like, yeah, that's not science.
Don't bless Massey's heart. Yeah. Massey's going in on Mike Johnson. Sometimes I can stand Massey, because the kind of libertarian I like creeps out, but then it's like, oh, Massey, you're so clueless. You don't know what's going on.
We're trying to figure out who was funding these. We know some of these were Soros funded.
Do you hear that? What's your evidence? George Soros. That's what we've learned here. John Kerry has been to China. He knows Joe Biden, and George Soros is the evidence.
And real quick, just the George Soros is accused of what crime? Oh, we don't know. We don't know. He's just a liberal who gives money, so he's bad.
He exists. He's Jewish, and he has money, and so conspiracy.
He's also gross. I'm not a fan of George Soros. I think what he did to earn a big portion of his wealth was disgusting. But there are two other people who did the exact same thing he did, and they also donate to liberal campaigns. But George Soros is the only one of the three who happens to be Jewish. So you guys do the math.
Exactly. It's fine. If you're a white male, corruption is celebrated. Like, that's what you know what I mean? Excuse me, a non-Jewish white male. The corruption and amassing obscene wealth is celebrated, and you're smart for doing it. But if you're a woman, if you're George Soros, then you're crooked, and you're a whole crooked Hillary, then you're a horrible person. But if you've committed a bunch of crimes, you hate that men wear makeup, but you have your own makeup artist who paints you orange every day, then you're an intelligent guy who they will take at your word.
Yeah.
Oh, there's David's here. Should we talk to Dave?
I think Jen has been busy blocking him on a million accounts. Faith sent a donation and said 49% to the court jester, W. Felice. That's pretty good. Well done, Faith. I love Faith. You're sweet.
Let's bring it home.
Some of them may have had some other foreign infusions of cash from our enemies
Here
around
we go
the world.
again.
And every American knows that the Biden energy policy is a disaster. That's showing up in the polls. But we have a lot of questions. And just like everything else, they're slow at turning over this investigation. The information that we've requested, it's not classified. We just want to know exactly who John Kerry was colluding with and try to figure out why he was doing that and what damage it's done to the American taxpayers.
Why he was doing that. So I just you want to talk about slander? This no facts, accuses John Kerry of crimes, is very vague, brings in George Soros. Every conspiracy theory gives no information. He has no information about anything. Just said, today I'm just going to make up some random crimes. I'm going to insinuate. Slander.
How did John Kerry get on the radar? What happened? I haven't heard of John Kerry in forever. What's going on there?
He just he just was like, I need somebody who knows Joe Biden and has been to China. Like that. That's literally, he's like, okay, I'm running out of people to accuse of obstruction and colluding crimes. Okay, John Kerry's been to China and he knows Joe Biden. James Comer just didn't want to make the same circular argument all the rest of the Republicans are doing. So he's like, I'm just going to accuse John Kerry of a crime.
Could you try, could you just next time, James Comer, if you're listening, would you just please tell us what crime you think people have committed before you start investigating? Is that too much to ask, James Comer?
Yes,
to just
probably.
Just let us know what you're investigating. Doug sent a donation, said, thanks for trying. I am done trying, and thank you for the eye candy. And I mean you. I think that's me.
Oh,
take that, Felice. I was the eye.
I know.
For once, I was the eye.
I think that you're
candy.
objectively good looking. I think we can all agree on that.
Right,
I think plenty of
enough.
people find you
That's
attractive, Jay.
That's enough.
I know you can't stand receiving compliments.
Just
Can't
let me
stand
be the
receiving
victim.
compliments.
Just let me be the victim for a few minutes.
I'm
would you?
just saying.
I'm better at that. All right,
Let's listen to Chris Murphy.
Yeah, I don't have a hard cutoff today. Let's keep it going.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to play because, like, I do think Chris Murphy is a very talented legislator, a great speaker, and I don't think we really hear from him enough. Like, he's the lead negotiator for the Democrats in the Senate. He represents Connecticut. Like, let's listen to. He was on Chris Hayes' show last night.
Oh, what Langford said today, it's like, I don't know how much in the end reality is going to matter to the marginal swing voter, but for him to come out and be like, my colleagues killed this because it's an election year and they want Donald Trump to win, like, that's plain as day. Those are the facts of what happened. And do you think in the end that will matter to the politics of the issue?
Well, you know that it only matters if we repeat it. And I do think that Democrats, especially over the last several years, have become so used to being on the defensive on this issue of immigration that we just refuse to talk about it and we let Republicans define the issue. We now have the opportunity to go on the offensive, right? We have the receipts. We can show people that there was a breakthrough bipartisan bill that, if passed, would have brought some order to the border. Frankly, the reason Republicans turned against it was because we did too good a job. We actually were going to give President Biden tools that would be able to control numbers, and Republicans couldn't imagine a world in which they didn't have the border to run on this November. So
we could speak about, he is so right what he said, like, because it's been such a hotly contested issue, the border, Democrats don't speak about it. They don't talk about their beliefs. We don't message about it. We just ignore it. We, like, in Joe Biden's run for president, when he won, we largely weren't talking about the border, and now we need to message about it. Like, I feel, and I don't want to say I've known about the border, but I've always been that way. It's hard to have a discussion with Republicans because it became so combative. But I think I've now really educated myself, can speak very confidently about the border. And I think that's what we all need to be endeavoring to do.
Yeah, I think why Democrats historically have run from like that type of messaging is that the Republicans, no matter what, always say we have a border crisis. Like, when we didn't have a border crisis, it was a border crisis. They campaign on the border every single election. I was working for Romney when we were campaigning on the border. I went back, I've looked at those numbers, turns out not a crisis. But that's the real problem, is that for Democrats, if you campaign on the border, or if you're messaging at a time right now when the border is in actual crisis, what Republicans will do is they'll throw that back in your face another time when they're faking another border crisis, and then they'll be like, oh, you used to care about the border. And that's the problem, is that the Republican Party has been the boy who cried wolf about the border for decades now. That's what they've been doing, and Democrats have been laughing at them like, get your shit together. And now that there's an actual issue, this is what's so goddamn crazy. Now that there's actually an issue, once it became reality, and this is who the Republican Party is, once something is no longer a fringe conspiracy and it's right in front of your goddamn face and it's a reality, suddenly we're not going to do anything about that. We can't do anything about that.
It's wild. And it just shows it's bad faith, right? Like, they want the issue, right? Not the solution. Right. It's never about the actual solution.
And make no mistake, this would be happening if Donald Trump was still in office. Had Donald Trump won, this would still be going on. And you know what Republicans would be doing? Blaming Democrats. They would be blaming Democrats for everybody showing up at the border, and they would just run on, oh, these people are just here because they want to go to sanctuary cities and become voters. It's the defense they're using now that they're doing nothing about the border, and now that they've gone away from like, oh, we've got to address this. Now what they're saying is, oh, the Democrats are only putting forth this bill to get people to vote, so they need voters, which makes no sense because these people can't vote until they're citizens. We already have a process.
Oh, I have something perfect to play, which is just the point, like what you said about Trump. If Trump was in office, he would be blaming this on the Democrats, which he did. Listen to this.
If you need any more proof, well, it was Donald Trump who once said, it's the job of Congress to solve the border.
The only long-term solution to the crisis and the only way to ensure the endurance of our nation as a sovereign country is for Congress to overcome open borders obstruction.
Do you hear that?
He said sovereign.
Remember when he said, and he says over and over, oh, there's no bill needed. Well, that's funny because when he was the president of the United States and was faced with handling this crisis, he knew, because he had been advised, that federal immigration law had to change.
Why? Because he knew that he didn't have the authority. Not because he didn't want the authority, but he knew, and he was advised, like, yeah, you can't just unilaterally do this. But again, Donald Trump doesn't remember saying that. He doesn't remember that was his argument, and Republicans certainly don't remember that was his argument. And they don't care. That would mean nothing. There is not a Republican or a MAGA on earth that would hear that clip and think anything of it. They do not care. They've given up on caring. They've given up on
Guys,
reality.
tap the screen. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No,
they have given up on reality. They are in an alternative reality. Like, here we have your guy, the guy you explicitly believe everything he says without question. Well, here he is without question saying it's the job of Congress to handle the open borders. So which one is it? Was he lying when he was president, or is he lying now?
Were they lying when they pushed through HR 2, or are they lying now when they say you don't need a bill? Like, goddamn, guys. Can we just grow up like a little bit? Can just one of you? I thought yesterday, honest to God, even though I didn't want to bring him up, I thought I had way too much hope in Gorilla. I really thought, like, this is so obvious that he would have to admit it. Like, he was like my last hope of, like, when something's obvious, because we saw him make some changes when it came to things like systemic racism, but I'm like, all right, this is one of those things where it is so transparent what they're doing. They push a bill, and then when the bill comes back, they're like, we don't need a bill. We just need President Trump. Like, it's so obvious who's pulling the strings. It's so obvious that they don't have a plan. It's so obvious that, like, this is all just pandering, and yet it's too hard for these people to admit that they've been duped. So they would rather just bury their head in the sand and pretend nothing is happening.
Yeah, it's absolutely embarrassing. Like, at some, I mean, if you want to just continually perjure yourself, like, go against, like, every day you literally have to just say, hey, what I said yesterday, well, Trump is saying the opposite, so now, like, everything, I'm a fraud. Everything, like, he literally makes his own followers frauds every single day.
Right, and that is the massive miscalculation that Republicans are making. They think everybody is stupid, not just your base. Like, you know, your base is stupid. You guys get that. But not everybody is stupid. And so there are people that see through this. You can't do this. There's no scenario where, especially in media today, like when everything you say is recorded, everybody can find a clip of it. There's just not a scenario in this world where that works anymore. The only people who are going to continue to ride the MAGA train are those who have already, again, blood in, blood out. They're in it. They'll tell you, you watch clip after clip after clip of MAGA people saying, like, there's nothing Donald Trump could do to cost the vote. They mean that. And it's not a small number of people who think that. It's a large number of people. And I just want to, as we finish up today, like, I want to say on the record, I think that what the Republicans have done is overplayed their hand. I think that they've underestimated the intelligence of some Republicans and moderates. And they think, because if they say things confidently enough and distract enough, that Americans will re-elect Donald Trump. And I think that they are woefully and poorly informed. And let me make sure I got everything here.
And underestimate women. Like, and people with uteruses, you've systematically taken away our rights, made us watch as women like Kate Cox are disenfranchised, are literally bleeding out, fluid are leaking from their bodies, are in danger of dying and need medical care. And people like Ken Paxton are denying them at every turn, and, like, not counting on women to take notice of that and vote accordingly is delusional.
I have two messages here. First from Lisa for exposing hypocrisy and tolerating Trump worshippers. And we will close this out. A request from Lou. Lou requested 1 minute of ASMR. Yes. So I will tell you, thank you for joining us today. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to noon Pacific Standard Time. You can find us on YouTube where we replay our show every day. Make sure that you're following Felice and liking and commenting on those videos. We appreciate all of you. Thank you for the generous gifts. We are proud to be participating in CoinCot, and we just highly recommend that as you spend the rest of your day on TikTok, do so with other people who are participating in CoinCot. Support BIPOC creators, and we'll see you in the morning.
I really think we have something there. This could
Thanks,
be our
everybody.
night thing.
If any of those donations came in late, I promise I'll read the messages tomorrow. I apologize if I missed any of them. I'll go through and double check that I didn't miss any. If I did, I'll read them tomorrow, I promise. Thank you guys for the support. We will see you in the morning.